Chapter 1268. In fact, Lizzie had already stayed there that night. Rin Xiling said that it was just a matter of time and she had to get used to it. It was better to get used to it as soon as possible. Soon after dinner, she received a message from Nan Xiaonan. She knew that Nan Xiaonan had to leave for a period of time. It was a pity that she couldn't accept her invitation. Lizzie stayed in the guest room that had been cleaned up before and given to Nan Xiaonan for 2 days. She was a monster, so she was naturally very sensitive to the aura of heaven and earth. Because of Nan Xiaonan's example, the warm jade placed under Nanny Ren's mattress didn't attract any attention this time. No one would notice it in the future, unless Nanny Ren, who was in the last stage of laziness, remembered to clean the bottom of the mattress. After this night, there were only 3 days left before Luochio announced to the public that he would go abroad. He still didn't intend to open the door and take the initiative to do business. Since he was a child, Luochio was more inclined to plan actions. In these few days, he planned to plan the next 1 or 2 years. The game God King was about to log into other subworlds, which meant that he was likely to not have to worry about too many things soon, for a whole year. Around this time last year, he became the boss of the club. Now a whole year had passed, and he had been used to this kind of life. This year was unusually long for him. Luochio recalled the customers who had traded with him. One story after another flowed through his heart and turned into a little warmth. It was like warm spring water gradually washing the mountain stream in the cold winter. He knew that he didn't fail in the struggle of emotional deprivation for a whole year. But he always hid the stage where his rationality was magnified and his emotion was suppressed. It's almost time for me to try all kinds of strong emotions by myself. In front of the desk, Luochio slowly wrote down the 2 extremes of the strongest human emotions, love and hate. He couldn't hate a person. Zhou Yuxing's matter had been dealt with. For him, there was no reason to hate. At present, there was nothing in this world that could make him hate. Then all that's left is love. Luochio was silent for a moment. He erased the word hate from the white paper and slowly filled in the category of love. He wrote it down stroke by stroke. The last part of the text read, "Love the world, love life, love all the people who love me." After the words were written, they jumped out from the paper. His heart skipped a beat, and he flipped through the contents of the star creation technique that Nan Xiaonan had written. He did not really need to study it, because he already knew all the normal rules and changes of the star creation technique. This was a temporary state that he bought back temporarily, which was equivalent to giving himself a buff. He didn't need a long time. He just needed to be able to use the star creation technique at this time. The star creation marks that corresponded to these words appeared out of thin air and finally merged with these words. Thus, they possessed another kind of life. Luochio thought for a while and took out a string of prayer beads from the drawer. This was a gift from Sister Ollie on the cruise ship during the Golden Week last year. The words jumped into the prayer beads one by one and finally disappeared. Luochio put the prayer beads on again. This was the warning he gave himself. After the buff was removed, he could only know the star creation technique, but not use it again. Luochio smiled and turned off the table lamp. Outside the room, Ren Xiling and Lizzie seemed to have not slept yet. They were whispering something. In the silence, Luochio slept with his clothes on. His thoughts were like ripples, slowly rippling to listen to the sound of everything. In the living room, Lizzie, who was chatting with Nanny Ren, suddenly sat up and killed a mosquito that flew in front of her with a snap. The sound of clapping hands startled the sleepy Nanny Ren and gave her a sideways glance. Lizzie blinked and smiled. "Sister Ren, do you suddenly feel very comfortable and happy?" "I feel very sleepy," Ren Xiling said grumpily. "Why do I have to accompany you to watch the food program in the middle of the night? If you want to read the newspaper, go to the company's group." She spoke softly and softly, as if she was being held gently by someone who treated her as something precious. In the same night, when the terrifying screams that were weakened by the space stopped, 2 strong men endured the discomfort and walked into the room. They dragged out the 2 badly mutilated corpses. After that, someone sent 2 panic-stricken and struggling sloppy vagrants into the room. While outside, Chung Yun was recording the number of dead experimental subjects with his scalp tingling. Chung Yun was not the only one who had the same feeling. There were also several civilian experts and Master Huang's disciple, Chen Er. Chen Er seldom did evil things, but it didn't mean that he didn't do them. In the early years, he followed Master Huang around Southeast Asia for a period of time. In fact, Master Huang started his business in Hong Kong. At that time, many rich people and gangsters liked to ask Huang Chifa for fortune-telling and even black magic. Huang Chifa's black magic was not passed down from his sect, but he had learned it in Nanyang when he was traveling abroad. Chen Er had seen his master use black magic several times and felt that it was the most vicious thing in the world, but it seemed not as terrible as what happened in the sealed room in front of him. But if 24 inside could succeed, then not only him, but all the people here might have a chance to have real power. Chen Er only learned a little about feng shui, but he had been greatly benefited by it. Therefore, he naturally longed for the more powerful power. Everyone longed for power, no matter it was the superpower of wealth or the real power of transcendence. Most of those who were recruited by Zhong Luochen wanted to be on the same side as Chen Er. Otherwise, no one wanted to get involved in this kind of immoral thing. How many are left? In this environment, filled with screams from time to time, Zhong Luochen, who was calmer than everyone else, suddenly asked Chung Yun, "Second young master, there are, 8 left." Chung Yun swallowed his saliva. According to this pace, Master 24 should be able to do another 4 experiments. If it still fails, we have to wait for a few more days to get some new goods. Zhong Luochen's finger tapped on the table. Then he nodded and stood up. "You stay here and watch the experiment. I'll go check on the children." The children mentioned by Zhong Luochen were naturally the children who were discovered by the Superpower Research Lab before he met 24, who were born with microability. He wouldn't choose to put all his eggs in the same basket, sharing the risk. This was something that the children of aristocratic families had to learn from the beginning. 24's experiment and the research lab's research had been carried out at the same time. However, 24 was very interested in these children with microability and more than once proposed to use these children for experiments. Naturally, Zhong Luochen had been suppressing it. "Second young master, don't worry. Once there is news, I'll inform you at the first time." Zhong Luochen nodded casually, quickly walked out of this area, and stepped into another part of the lab. Chung Yun covered his ears with both hands, hiding far away from 24's experiment room. This location was actually closer to the room used for those homeless people. Chung Yun looked in from the corner of the curtain, seeing the rest of the homeless people at this time were restlessly walking around in the room. These people might be born with mental disabilities or have become delirious after years of wandering or even numb, but it seemed that their natural instinct for danger was still there, so they subconsciously knew fear. Only a bald young man, who didn't even have eyebrows, sat motionlessly, watching the movements of the people in the room. Chung Yun didn't feel the slightest fear from this bald young man, couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. He suddenly had some kind of interest, wanted to see how long this bald young man could remain indifferent. So he decided to arrange him to be the last one to carry out the experiment. It was too depressing here. The cruelty began to breed unconsciously. Listening to the screams, Chung Yun's eyes gradually became cruel. Compared to 24's purgatory-like place, the other side of the superpower lab was very peaceful. This side used a gentler method. The rooms were designed in pure white. Those children who were discovered with microability were also wearing white clothes, shoes, and socks. They were placed in different rooms with different decorations. There were rooms with ocean decorations as the theme park as the theme, and cartoon as the theme. This was to appease the children's uneasiness. In each room, there were 2 specialized researchers assisting the children in the training and development of their abilities. In fact, these researchers didn't have the slightest experience in studying superpower. They only had rich knowledge of physics, chemistry, and other applied sciences. At least for the second young master of the Zhong family, who had 0 foundation, he could only develop in this direction. In addition to the counselors in each room, there was also a researcher assigned outside the room, recording the children's performance throughout the whole process. Zhong Luochun vaguely felt that this was the right research direction. But the progress of this research was too slow. So slow that these children with micro-ability didn't have any progress until now. They were still the same as when they were discovered. Not knowing when it started, the second young master of the Zhong family had an urgent feeling in his heart. He already knew about that world, lingering outside, and could already see it, but he couldn't really step into it. That was why he compromised with 24. He asked Chengyan whether he liked Wei Xiaobao or He Shun. In fact, the question was similar to asking himself. The answer was the same. He didn't intend to give up on these two research directions. At this time, a researcher quickly walked to the side of the second young master of the Zhong family. He brought a new surprise for Zhong Luochun. We found a new child with ability. Oh, this indeed gave Zhong Luochun a new surprise. There should be many kinds of micro-ability, and it might not be possible to classify them, so it was always good to have more samples and data. Take me to see what ability is it this time? The researcher said excitedly. I think it should be called the ability of animal transformation. The child we found can freely switch between the characteristics of a pig and a normal person. Animal? Zhong Luochun was stunned, but he was quite interested in the ability of transformation. But it was a pity that he could only turn into a pig. His good mood suddenly dropped a bit, but it didn't hurt to have a look. After he adjusted his somewhat irritated mood after leaving 24, accompanied by the researcher, he came to the room where the newly found child was placed. Just as the researcher said, Zhong Luochun saw a 4- or 5-year-old child through the observation glass. At this time, he had a pig head that seemed to be incomplete and was looking around anxiously. In fact, not only his head, but also his 4 limbs were similar to those of a pig, but he was wearing children's clothes. How did you find this child? Zhong Luochun frowned. The child was wearing children's clothes. It seemed that he had a family. Maybe his family also knew about this child. The researcher said, it's like this. Among our children, there is one who can communicate with insects for a short time. We wanted to take him outside to get close to nature to see if we could stimulate his potential. Later, we found this child in the forest park used for the experiment. At that time, he was digging carrots in the plantation in the park to eat. No one else. No one else. The researcher said carefully, we did it after we confirmed it, and no one saw it. Zhong Luochun shook his head. Most of the children he found before were adopted from the orphanage or rescued from human traffickers. To directly bring them back, forget it. Compared with those homeless people, there was no difference. Zhong Luochun didn't intend to double standards. Since his subordinates did it, he would do it. Have you asked him about his situation? His family? He just needed to think about how to deal with it later. I did. He said that his name is Zhu Heezy or something. At this time, Zhu Zi in the room suddenly shook the bell-like necklace on his neck crazily. Sister Blackwater didn't come back very late tonight. At least no one in the family was hungry. As the eldest sister, the little rabbit monster dutifully prepared dinner for her brothers and sisters. After dinner, she began to coax some of the cubs to sleep. Sister Blackwater didn't come back until it was late at night, and she brought back a little bird. Sister Blackwater, is this? Blackwater held the little bird carefully, smiling lovingly. I found it by accident. Part of its intelligence has just been opened, and it will turn into a monster in the future. I have to look after it, so I came back late. Many cubs had fallen asleep. The little rabbit didn't dare to speak loudly, but she couldn't hide her joy. She said happily, Great, we have a new child. By the way, where is Zhu Zi? Blackwater rubbed the little rabbit's head and asked casually. Usually, Zhu Zi would come to her first when she came back, looking for food. No matter whether he had dinner or not, he was always hungry. I picked some fruits on my way back. They tasted good. Blackwater said with a smile. Oh, speaking of which, where is Zhu Zi? The little rabbit noticed something. No wonder I feel it's so quiet today. I haven't seen this glutton since this morning. He must have slipped out to look for food. This kid, Blackwater, shakes her head. Apart from blaming them, she smiles. Her tolerance to these kids could actually be described as a kind mother who spoiled her son more often than not. The sound of a bell ringing suddenly rang in her ears. Blackwater's face changed slightly, and then her straight hair scattered messily. Suddenly, a fierce monster power broke out. Sister, Zhu Zi is in danger. Blackwater took a breath, and the violent monster power was suppressed. But her voice was much colder. She ordered, "You stay here and look after the house. I'll be back soon." Genius remembered the address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1269. In front of the observation room, Zhong Luochen frowned. Why does the child keep shaking the bell on his neck? The observation room was equipped with a single-sided glass, so the situation outside could not be seen from the inside. The researcher subconsciously pushed up his glasses and said, "Maybe it's a sign of uneasiness." Although the child is only a few years old, his strength is no less than an adult's. We spent a lot of effort to catch him and even used anesthetics. However, we don't dare to get close to him now because he will bite. One of us was bitten by him, but he's fine after bandaging. However, we don't dare to go in for the time being unless we continue to give him anesthetics. Zhong Luochen thought for a while. Calm him down first and ask about his family situation. Especially his family situation, we must find out as soon as possible. This is the most important thing. When they were talking, the little piglet in the observation room was so frightened that he was about to cry. The frequency of shaking the bell became faster and faster. This bell was given to him by Sister Inc. Not only him, but the other siblings in the family also had one. This was to prevent the cubs from sending out a message when they were in danger. The bell was just a simple bell, but it hid the scales that Blackwater pulled out from her body. "Sister, come quickly. I'm so hungry. Everyone here is bad. They won't give me anything to eat." Woo-woo. The cries of the little piglet in the observation room were directly transmitted. Zhong Luochen and the researcher listened carefully. The second young master of the Zhong family suddenly said, "He really has a family. Why is he shaking this bell? What can bell do?" The researcher asked subconsciously. Zhong Luochen suddenly had a bad feeling. He did not know where the premonition came from, but it was getting stronger. "Go and find some food. Calm the child first. Then find a way to take out his bell. I have a feeling that this bell is not simple." "Okay." The researcher nodded and walked out quickly. There was no shortage of food here, especially food that children like to eat. After all, they believed that keeping the children happy while they were conducting research would help them grow better. These children were more or less orphans, and they were not from the orphanage. Their lives in the past could not be considered good, but now they were well taken care of here, except for some restrictions on their freedom. The children did not mind and gradually built a relationship with the researchers here. However, for some reason, the uneasy feeling in Zhong Luochen's heart grew stronger and stronger. Last two, Chengyan looked at the two bloody corpses that were dragged out and shook his head. This time, 24 personally dragged them out. He had already tested more than a dozen bodies and was planning to come out to drink some water and take a rest. At this moment, Chengyan set his eyes on the last two test subjects. Among them, there was a bald young man whom Chengyan specially saved for the end. Chengyan looked at him carefully and found that this bald young man had a westernized face. This guy looks like an idiot, but his body is so healthy. When the bald youth was brought out, the big man who escorted him frowned and said, "Assistant Cheng, this guy doesn't look like an ordinary person. Look at his muscles. Generally speaking, without long-term and scientific training, it's impossible to reach this level. It's like the golden ratio." Of course, Chengyan did not know about training or body proportions. Although he did not know, it did not mean that he would pretend to know. Chengyan was very clear about his own ability. Of course, he was the best at flattery, but his other talents were ordinary. However, he had one advantage, that was, he could listen to the professional's words. "Will there be trouble?" Chengyan frowned and asked. The man said, "It's hard to say, but ordinary people would not exercise like this." No, it should be said that he trained his body to reach this state. But I don't know why he became an idiot. Well, Chengyan paced. Let's detain him first. I will ask him how he found this place. When a man was about to nod, 24 who just came back from drinking water suddenly walked over with a gloomy face. Everyone had already experienced 24's cruelty and horror. At this moment, seeing 24 walking over, the robust man who was detaining the bald young man stepped back subconsciously. 24 Master. Master? Chung Yin mustered up his courage and called out. 24 stretched out his hand and pinched the bald youth's arm, then his body, as if he was checking something. Suddenly, he cracked open his mouth and revealed a strange smile. Isn't there a good material here? Wouldn't it have been better if you had taken out earlier? Why waste so much of my energy with that trash? Chung Yin gave a start. Master, you mean this guy will succeed? 24 said, at least 10 times more successful than those trash. Chung Yin immediately gritted his teeth, saying in a low voice, what are you waiting for? Send this guy to the master's room. After a short while, the bald youth was thrown into the room, and 24 followed him with a smile. As for the homeless man who was originally in the same group as the bald youth, no one paid any attention to him, and he was once again locked in his original room. Assistant Chung, what if this bald young man has some background? It was the one who noticed the bald young man was not ordinary at the beginning. At this moment, he reminded Chung Yin in a low voice. Chung Yin waved his hand. If he succeeds, it won't be a problem. If he succeeds, no matter what kind of trouble, young master will be able to suppress it, right? This person nodded in agreement. Knowing the huge power behind the Zhong family, of course he wouldn't doubt this sentence. 24 didn't care what outsiders thought. At this moment, he was sizing up the bald young man who was standing there in a daze. 24 walked to the front of the young man. Well, the people on the internet said that bald people are very strong. Is it true? You've become stronger because you become bald? Idiot 24. Idiot 24. That's a manga. Idiot 24. 24 grabbed the crow on his shoulder and threw it out. This time, it wasn't thrown to the wall, but directly to the bald young man's body. The crow instantly turned into a dark shadow, wrapping the bald young man like a black cocoon. 24 said slowly, this should be able to bear my consciousness, transform the soul? Why would he do this kind of thing for Zhong Luoqin? Although he was an immortal level conjurer, but when it came to matters related to the soul, it wasn't something that he could completely understand. It wasn't that he couldn't do it, but the cost and the result was only to allow the individual to use the conjurer, which was simply unequal. 24 just wanted to change a better body for himself. He was involved in this subworld, and time was really too short. The body that his consciousness was attached to was really very poor. Of course, as a cursemancer, he didn't care too much about his body. However, he had been punched several times by a guy with terrifying strength. His bones were almost broken. Moreover, there was a strange energy that stayed in his body. Instead of wasting time to expel this strange energy and then heal his injuries, it was better to directly change his body to a new one. It would be faster. It was just that it wasn't easy to find a new body that was compatible with him. At least, those dead vagrants in front of him didn't have a compatible body that satisfied him. The shadow that the crow turned into was currently analyzing the bald young man's body little by little. 24's dim eyes were getting brighter and brighter. I actually found a treasure. The potential of this body is actually, he didn't care much about the problem of the body, as long as it was compatible with his soul, so that he could use the conjurer smoothly. However, if the new body's potential was high, he would naturally be happy to see it. At least when he was fighting with a warrior, he wouldn't spit out a few mouthfuls of blood after a punch, right? The crow's voice suddenly rang. Idiot 24, deconstruction complete. 24 was more and more satisfied. This is really amazing. This body actually only has a simple consciousness and doesn't even have a soul. It's simply born to be a vessel. He revealed a sinister smile, and his body walked into the black cocoon, merging into it little by little. The ship had completely left the dock. At this time, only a faint light could be seen in the city. It's only been a while, and you're already reluctant to part with it. In the sea breeze, Tang Tianlin held a bottle of red wine in his left hand and 2 wine glasses upside down in his right hand. He came to Nan Xiaonan, who was enjoying the breeze on the deck, and smiled. Take a break. Red wine contained less sugar. She looked at the red wine, thinking about the problem of calories. In fact, she was more inclined towards drinks like cola. She heard that cola had a unique name, Happy Water. No, I don't drink. She said indifferently. Not only sugar, alcohol would also affect the brain's activity, and it was not convenient for her to speed up her thinking. Tang Tian Lin didn't mind. In his memory, Nan Xiaonan was indeed a person who almost didn't touch alcohol. All right, I have something to ask you. She ran her fingers through her loose hair in the sea breeze. That night, other than House, you also took the clone away, right? How did you deal with the clone? Or has he been disposed of? Tang Tianlin said, I don't know. He's missing. Missing? She analyzed the authenticity of this statement. Tang Tianlin said, that day when I came out from the secret tunnel, I actually hid the test subject in the rockery behind the exit. I planned to retrieve it after everything was over. But when I went back later, he was gone, and I couldn't find him. He left on his own. Maybe, Tang Tianlin said with uncertainty. This guy seems to have a bit of his own consciousness. She recalled that when the cultivation chamber exploded, the clone moved on its own. Should be. She looked at Tang Tianlin and said coldly, you seem to be more concerned about whether the clone can be found than whether it can be found. Why? Tang Tianlin said slowly, how do we distinguish a person from a person? A person who can be recognized by morality, a living person who can be defined? He also looked at the city that was fading away. Soul? What is that? I can't see it or touch it, but as long as it has consciousness, it will naturally know how to think. Isn't the essence of a human being because he knows how to think? If he leaves on his own, if he can live a good life in the future, doesn't it prove that he is already a real person? She said with a smile, because we are in the same boat, you are also a Hausen clone. Tang Tianlin didn't say anything. He just smiled lightly, raised his glass, and said softly, a toast to life. The wind started to blow. Suddenly, a strong sea breeze blew toward the city. A toast to the morning sun, a toast to the moonlight. Bu Bugao's tone-deaf voice buzzed in Wang Hu's ears like a fly. As long as the headphones were removed, it would be another style. Well, let's call it singing for the time being. Wang Hu resisted the urge to punch Bu Bugao and moved away from Bu Bugao. Since receiving the task of monitoring the situation in the building, the computer room on the roof of another building opposite the building had become a temporary stronghold for him and Bu Bugao. I want to fight with that woman again. Such an idea suddenly popped up in Wang Hu's mind. That powerful woman on the roof of the pet hospital. Suddenly, Wang Hu's pores opened in an instant, and the hair on the surface of his body stood up automatically. He stood up abruptly. He stood up straight. He jumped off Bu Bugao. What's wrong with you again? Bu Bugao took off his headphones. Wang Hu walked out of the computer room, ignoring Bu Bugao. He ran directly to the rooftop and stared at the night sky. Bu Bugao was the best at the back. With a sullen face, he followed Wang Hu and looked at the night sky. The night seemed to be pressing down, and the moon was covered by a dark cloud. It seemed to have darkened directly, and there was a strong wind blowing, and Bu Bugao trembled subconsciously. Is it going to rain? It's the demon aura. Wang Hu's eyes lit up. The powerful demon aura is coming. Above the building, a dark cloud visible to the naked eye appeared out of nowhere. It was a rotating dark cloud. It was supposed to be late at night, but to be able to see dark clouds was a very unusual thing. The security guard at the entrance of the building looked up in surprise. He found that the cloud seemed to be dark red, like a demon cloud. The security guard couldn't help but take out his phone, intending to take a picture of this scene. At this moment, the sound of footsteps entered his ears. It was the clear sound of high heels on the concrete road. He looked in the direction of the sound, and in the dark night, he saw a woman walking slowly. Black clothes, black skirt, black lips, cold eyes. The security guard was stunned. This woman was extremely beautiful, but he suddenly shivered. The moment his body shivered, the woman appeared in front of him in a flash, as if ignoring space. You? Before he could speak, his neck was directly grabbed by this beautiful and terrifying woman and lifted up. You? Where did you take my piggy to? Speak. The woman's hair moved with the slight breeze and scattered. The The demon cloud in the sky turned completely dark red in an instant. Old Tai set a small goal, first carrot remember New Year's Eve Chinese network. Oh, Chapter 1270. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, there was the sound of thunder. It was muffled thunder. Lu Mingho, who was writing a report in the office, was startled. He walked out of the window and looked up at the strange sky. His face changed instantly. The door was pushed open with a bang, and Wei Zidao walked in quickly. His face was grim. He was holding a small instrument in his hand, and the indicator light on the instrument was flashing red. Brother Hao, look. The demon aura, a measuring instrument, is 100 times more than the normal one. What happened? Lu Mingho shook his head, subconsciously looking at the cup on the desk. The half-full glass of water seemed to have been shaken, and the clear water began to move violently, causing countless small splashes. The phone rang. It was Bu Gao. Wei Zidao took it in a hurry. Then his face changed slightly. Brother Hao, there's a monster approaching the building of Zhong Luochen's company. I'm afraid it's at least a big monster. Lu Mingho's pupils suddenly opened. His next reaction was, go. Let's go and see. What? I don't know. The security guard who was lifted up by the neck was struggling in pain. His voice was intermittent. Black water snorted coldly and threw the man away. The security guard body was suddenly thrown into the security booth, smashing it into smithereens. His head was bleeding, and he fainted. At this moment, the thick demonic clouds in the sky covered the sky and pressed down, as if the demonic clouds were pressing down on the city. Blackwater's eyes became colder and colder. She walked directly to the entrance of the building. The glass door at the entrance of the lobby exploded before she arrived. The entire building was more than 30 stories high. Almost all the windows were shattered at this moment. Countless pieces of glass scattered like stardust. The good news was that it was already late at night. The normal employees had already left early. The bad news was that several security guards who were patrolling the building were so scared that they couldn't stop trembling. Some of them even fell from the corridor. Boom, boom, boom. The building shook slightly like an earthquake, and this shock was directly transmitted to the research institute in the negative floor of the building. What happened? Earthquake? Cheng-Yin looked at the dust falling from the ceiling and felt the vibration from the floor. Will there be an earthquake here? No one could answer. They just subconsciously looked at the room where 24 was doing his experiments. 24 had been in there for some time, much longer than any of the previous experiments he had done. Is it because of the great master? Cheng-Yin frowned and then relaxed. He looked happy. Are we going to succeed this time? Everyone was pleasantly surprised. Only Chen-Er was frowning. A sense of uneasiness spread through his heart, and his mood suddenly became uneasy. He quickly pinched his fingers and began to calculate. It was just that he was not proficient in the art. He had only learned the surface of the finger divination along the way. He could not calculate what was going on, but the feeling of uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. His heart was beating rapidly, and Chen-Er was already in a state of trembling. He decisively bit his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. He stuck the blood on his finger and smeared it on his eyelids. Chen-Er opened his eyes again and looked at the people present. At this time, the people present were all covered with dark clouds, which was the sign of death. He was shocked and shouted without hesitation, "Let's go. There is danger here. You are all in danger." Master Chun? Cheng-Yin was stunned. He was in awe and fear of 24, but he was very respectful to Chen-Er. After all, Chen-Er had helped him set up a lot of peach blossom arrays, which indeed allowed him to live a very romantic life. I can't explain so much. You are all in big trouble. If you don't want to die, listen to me and leave here immediately, Chen-Er said and directly rushed to the exit without explaining anything. What's wrong with him? A martial arts master frowned. Crazy. These martial arts masters were not as afraid of Chen-Er as they were of 24. They only thought Chen-Er was a Jianghu charlatan. They didn't know whether he had real skills or not. At most, his 12 moves of Tantue were not bad, but most of them were disdainful of him. I will go and have a look. Cheng-Yin suddenly said, "Masters, please stay here and take care of him. After all, Chung Yin still thought that Chun Air's peach blossom arrays were good. At this time, he wanted to check on Chun Air's situation, so he quickly walked out. The remaining martial arts masters shrugged. They didn't care about Chun Air's crazy behavior. Perhaps he was just scared out of his wits by the sudden vibration. Chun Air was scared, but they weren't. The bigger the vibration, the higher the possibility of success. Inside, there was the power that they dreamed of. But this time, countless cracks appeared on the ceiling above their heads. In just a breath, the ceiling directly broke down, and a figure directly fell from the crack. Almost at the same time, the black cocoon in the room quietly sank into the floor little by little. Finally, it completely sank into the ground. Cement blocks mixed with steel bars smashed this floor beyond recognition. Many employees working for the Research Institute were buried in these stones. After all, these martial artists had trained their bodies for many years, so their resistance was very good. At this time, they pushed away the heavy objects on their bodies, patting the dust and climbing up. At present, the lights were dim, and only the emergency lights were on. In the red light, they saw a strange woman in a black dress with black hair, looking around with sharp eyes. Just a glance. With just a glance, several martial artists were greatly shocked. They thought that this was bad. This person had a terrifying background. Not here, but he's in. They heard this strange woman whispering something. They responded cautiously, not intending to fight with this terrifying woman unless it was absolutely necessary. So someone stood out, asking tentatively, "This lady, what do you want to do?" The strange woman, Blackwater, glanced at her casually. She had already sensed the breath of Zhu Heezy, but at the same time, a strong smell of blood rushed into her nose. This was not the smell of blood that came from the wounds of those who were crushed under the rubble when she came down, but a stronger smell. She frowned and found the source of the smell. It was from several big wooden boxes piled up in the corner. Blackwater waved her hand, and those wooden boxes were instantly broken open. More than 10 badly mutilated corpses slid out. The brutality of the corpses made Blackwater, an authentic monster, feel disgusted. "What are these for?" Blackwater shouted coldly. The martial artists were in a trance under the horrible monster aura of Blackwater. At this time, they were startled by her sudden shout. One of them answered subconsciously, "For experiments," but as soon as he said it, he regretted it very much in his heart. Experiments. Zhu Heezy, no. Blackwater's face slightly changed. When she looked at these martial artists again, her eyes were full of killing intent. She slightly opened her 5 fingers, and her fingernails grew a little longer. Her figure flashed in front of them like a ghost. After flashing, a drop of blood fell from Blackwater's fingernails. She snorted, "Bastards." The martial artists slowly turned their bodies, but the moment they turned, their carotid arteries on their necks burst open instantly, and blood burst out. They widened their eyes, and before they could cover the wound, they fell to the ground in horror and died. Blackwater was anxious about Zhu Heezy's safety. She did not check carefully here, but followed Zhu Heezy's monster aura and moved quickly. As soon as she left, 2 more figures arrived in the next moment. Seeing the corpses all over the ground and the wounded, Bu Bu Gao's face changed dramatically. Wang Hu's eyes lit up, and he waved his arm. It went in this direction. Bu Bu Gao's mind turned quickly, and he said directly, "Wang Hu, you go after it. You must stop it, and don't kill humans. I'll save the wounded here, and wait for the seniors to come." Wang Hu nodded right away, and his body directly shot out. Bu Bu Gao looked at the tragic situation here with trepidation, and then saw the horrifying corpse in the corner. He suddenly shuddered. "Damn it, did I break into the Japanese's laboratory? What did the second young master of the Zhong family do?" His heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, he picked up some scattered documents from the ground and looked at them. The alarm beeped crazily. The vibration of the building was also transmitted to the other side of the Research Institute. The sudden alarm made the group of people who were dealing with Zhu Heezy stop. As for the rest of the children, they were already asleep, but the sudden change at this time also startled them, and they came out of their respective rooms in a daze. What happened? Zhong Luochen looked around with a sullen face. But at this time, in the observation room, Zhu Heezy, who had quieted down after the food was delivered, suddenly began to shake the bell again. The sound of the bell made Zhong Luochen inexplicably annoyed. He said with a rare irritation, "Don't let him shake it. Take the bell away from me." Several researchers panicked, and they were completely in a state of obeying orders. Hearing this, they all stretched out their hands to grab Zhu Heezy, wanting to take away its bell. Zhu Heezy was just a cub, but its strength was not inferior to a healthy adult, and its body was short, so the researchers couldn't hold it down for a while. The research area here was basically separated from each other, so that it would be quieter during research. However, at this time, it was a mess outside. 6 or 7 children who were discovered to have microabilities, as well as dozens of researchers and more than 10 guards who stayed behind to guard the area. It was a mess outside. Zhong Luochen picked up the phone and frowned, calling Cheng Yun. The moment the number was dialed, he heard footsteps behind him. Tap, 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 tap. Zhong Luochen shuddered and turned around instantly, but the moment he saw the person, the phone slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. Miss M.O. The Miss M.O. in front of him was completely different from the one in Zhong Luochen's memory. The woman in the pottery studio was quiet and natural, as if she was an aloof flower. She was the most unique woman Zhong Luochen had ever seen in his life. Even the second young master of the Zhong family, who didn't like women, had a feeling of yearning for her. He couldn't forget her, but he had never thought that he would meet her under such circumstances. Miss M.O., why are you here? But Zhong Luochen soon felt that M.O. Shui was different from the one he knew. Her eyes, her appearance, such a bewitching black lips. Black Water didn't look at Zhong Luochen, nor did she care about his question. She just looked at the observation room, and the killing intent in her eyes grew stronger. In the observation room, Zhu Heezy was pressed to the ground by several researchers. Some grabbed its neck, some pressed its limbs, and it opened its mouth to bite a researcher's arm. It was completely twisted in Blackwater's view. Zhu Heezy was being bullied by several humans. "Sister, save me." Woo-woo. Blackwater coldly snorted, and the glass wall of the observation room suddenly exploded. The researchers were shocked, and their arms loosened. Little Piglet nimbly broke free and jumped into Blackwater's arms, crying loudly, "Sister, they bullied me. They didn't give me food. They even hit me. Sister, I'm so scared. Zhu Heezy is so scared. I want to go home." "Whoa, you're his sister?" Zhong Luochen blurted out. Blackwater glanced at Zhong Luochen coldly. Then, her gaze softened. She looked at Zhu Suizi and said softly, "It's okay. We'll go back soon. Don't cry, okay? They bullied me. They even gave me injections. Zhu Heezy is afraid of injections the most. Sister will punish them. Don't cry, good boy." Blackwater touched Zhu Heezy's head gently and comforted him. She slowly sighed and looked up at Zhong Luochen again. The second young master's heart suddenly jumped. "This is your place?" Blackwater asked suddenly. Zhong Luochen's mind turned quickly, but he calmed down quickly. He took a deep breath and said seriously, "Miss M.O., this is indeed my place, but there must be some misunderstanding. I didn't know this child is yours." But he stopped talking instantly. At this moment, Zhong Luochen's eyes widened. His eyes were filled with fear, panic, disbelief, and a little pain. He felt the pain that stung every nerve ending in his body, spreading from his chest in an instant. Miss Mo's arm pierced through his chest without any hesitation. Clean and neat, without any hesitation. "Why? No reason." Blackwater looked at him coldly. "As long as this is your place, I'll kill anyone who hurts my child." She pulled her arm out of Zhong Luochen's chest and waved it. The bloodstains on her arm instantly disappeared as if she was disgusted. Zhong Luochen's eyes began to dim, and his vision gradually blurred. He simply fell to the ground in a pool of blood. His consciousness gradually faded away. Everything seemed to have returned to the beginning. Before the complete darkness, he saw the clown boss with a mask. He and the boss had a conversation before the dark table. Then what are you going to keep? Although there are many things that can bring happiness, they can be summed up into a few: love, family, interests, achievements, and peace of mind. Keep the achievements for me. Are you sure? Maybe the better choice will be at the end. I believe in my feelings. It's useless to say more. Darkness. Chapter 1271. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the wall broke open at a certain point, and then a large area of the wall collapsed as a whole. Wang Hu stepped in through the hole. This was the most direct way to travel, and he barged in recklessly. Black Water just withdrew her hand that pierced through Zhong Luoqin's chest. Wang Hu happened to see this scene. He just casually glanced at Zhong Luoqin, who was lying in a pool of blood. Wang Hu didn't know this human, so he had no interest in him. He didn't care whether Zhong Luoqin was alive or dead. Therefore, to Wang Hu, there was no such thing as being one step behind. Black Water's expression was still cold. She took away a human's life. Yes, it was just a human. For her, Zhong Luoqin was just a dispensable human. To her, it couldn't be said that she hated humans, but at least she didn't have a good impression of them. Originally, if it wasn't for the endless exploitation by humans, she might still be living peacefully in the primeval forest, and the cubs she adopted wouldn't be homeless. Actually, she had been restraining herself because Shinryu had made a rule. Later, she was driven out of Yang Taizi's Taoist temple and came here. She thought she could live a peaceful life in Shinryu's territory. However, a human actually dared to touch her child, which was tantamount to challenging her fragile bottom line. Along the way, she first saw those brutally murdered corpses, then saw some children who were treated like white mice, and finally heard the cries of pigs. She didn't think she had gone too far. She just killed a mastermind. Black Water didn't intend to kill too many people. At least after the mastermind died, she planned to leave with Zhu Sui. As for how this would end, it was not within her scope of consideration. At worst, she could go somewhere else with her cubs if she couldn't stay here anymore. Kelowna was so big that she could find a place for her and her cubs to live. Even if she had to wander around, she didn't want her cubs to be hurt. But the situation seemed to have changed. For example, the one-armed strong man who broke the wall was different from those so-called martial arts masters. He emitted a pure demon aura, which was very oppressive. Are you with him? Black Water held Big Pig in one hand. When he looked at Wang Hu, his eyes contained vigilance. As if stimulated by the Black Water demon aura, a strong fighting spirit surged in Wang Hu's heart at this time. He, who had lost his memory, did not have much of a sense of right and wrong. At present, he was almost in a state where he acted according to his feelings. He shook his head. I don't know the humans here. I'm just interested in you. Fight with me, and if you win, you can leave. Are you trying to stall for time? Black Water frowned. Wang Hu was not good with words. He had probably been like that in the past and now. The habit of using fists to communicate was already deeply ingrained in his bones, as if it was an instinct. At this moment, without saying a word, he flew over and gave a kick. Why is this guy beating me up just like that? Black Water was shocked. However, the opponent's speed and pressure made her unable to lower her guard. In the face of Wang Hu's surprise attack, she instantly waved her hand and raised a light shield condensed by demonic power. Bang! The light shield was instantly shattered. Black Water was suddenly horrified. She could only feel a huge wave of demonic energy rushing towards her like a flood. She hurriedly hugged Zhu Lizi and shrunk her body. Her body was sent flying by the force of this attack and violently smashed into the wall. Elder sister, Zhu Lizi cried out in horror. Black Water's mouth spilled a trace of blood. She slowly took a breath and adjusted her breathing. At the same time, she put Big Pig down. You hide, sister will deal with this big guy. It will be done soon. Although she said so, she was more or less not confident in her heart. This one-armed guy, the pressure was getting stronger and stronger. However, Wang Hu did not take advantage of this moment to attack again. He just waited quietly until Black Water was ready. Then he took another step forward. Are you ready? If you're ready, then go all out. Otherwise, you might die. A lunatic who only knows how to fight. Black Water snorted coldly. She could be sure that there was no old grudge between her and the opponent. They did not even know each other. This guy did not show any hostility, only the desire to fight. She waved her hand, and a sword appeared out of thin air. The demonic power in her body was also crazily increasing. It was almost at the same level as the pressure brought by Wang Hu at this time. Good. Wang Hu was delighted. The two simply fought like this. The concrete of the underground superpower research room could not even resist the pressure of the terrifying demonic power released by them. Under the huge destructive power of the two, the foundation seemed to be in imminent danger. The vibrations spread all the way, making the whole building become turbulent at this time. The demonic cloud in the sky became bigger and bigger, forming a vortex. Two huge demonic powers were seen rushing straight to the sky. At the moment when this terrifying scene appeared, the two agents of the administration, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao, who had rushed all the way here, also arrived at the scene. Oh my God, there are at least two monsters at the level of big demons fighting? The two looked up in horror. Outside the building, two shadows were circling the building at this moment. Every time they fought, the aftermath was like a giant hammer that demolished the building, directly smashing part of the building into pieces. Damn it, is this calculated? Wei Zidao cursed at this time. Consultant Long just left, and they're already causing trouble? One of them seems to be Wang Hu. Lu Mingho was anxious in his heart. Saving people is more important. Bu Bu Gao said that there are many injured people below. This unknown big demon. Let Wang Hu deal with it first. With that, Lu Mingho hurriedly rushed into the building. I must go back and find out the origin of Wang Hu. Wei Zidao gritted his teeth and followed. A big demon-level monster already required more than a few high-level agents to deal with. He and Lu Mingho were only at the beginner level, and the other was at the intermediate level. It was simply another bottle of luck. No one knew what was going on. In an instant, it was like an earthquake. The moment Cheng Yun chased out and caught up with Chen Er, it was the moment of this drastic change. No matter if it was him or Chen Er, they were only flesh and blood. Facing the collapsed concrete, they were extremely fragile. But it was unknown whether Cheng Yun was not destined to die, or Chen Er really had the ability to seek luck and avoid disaster. In such a collapsed environment, the two of them were not hurt at all. Damn it, this road is also blocked. Chen Er cursed in a low voice. It was another road that was blocked because of the collapse. We are not going to be buried alive here, right, Master Chun? Cheng Yun grabbed Chen Er's arm as if he was a lifesaver. He really wanted to get rid of this guy. It was time to run for his life. Is there no other way? Chen Er stared at Cheng Yun and asked fiercely, I don't want to wait for death here. Cheng Yun panicked and said quickly, there may be another way in the research area on the other side. Then hurry up and lead the way. Chen Er shouted sternly. Cheng Yun shuddered and hurriedly ran to the other end of the super passage. After running for a while, Cheng Yun suddenly exclaimed in surprise, Why is there a hole here? Great, we don't need to take a detour. We can go through directly. It was not just a hole in the wall. There were similar holes in front of each wall. The two of them were pleasantly surprised to find that along the way, the environment gradually became less damaged. Master Chen, you are right. We are indeed in big trouble. Fortunately, I chased you out, or I might be buried alive like them. Cheng Yun still had a lingering fear and admired Chen Er even more. He felt that these geomancy guys were the most reliable. When we get out of here, I will definitely thank you. Let's talk about it later. Chen Er answered casually. Cheng Yun smiled, but his smile soon froze. At the end of the passage, a figure was lying on the ground with a large amount of blood flowing out. It was second young master. Young master, Cheng Yun screamed in horror, rolling to Zhong Luoqin's side. Young master? Young master! Wake up! Wake up! Young master! Chen Er frowned and walked in, but he was upset by Cheng Yun's howling. Stop shouting. Second young master Zhong is dead. Look at the wound. Does he look like a man who can survive? The bloody hole in the chest was so eye-catching. Cheng Yun's hands were trembling, and then he found that his hands were covered with Zhong Luoqin's blood. He was startled. When he looked at Zhong Luochen again, he found that the second young master's eyes weren't closed. Instead, he was staring at him. Cheng Yun screamed and pushed the cold corpse away. What should we do? Young master is dead. Dead. What can we do? Chun Er said angrily. Do you want to stay here and be buried with him? Are you going or not? Go. I can't go. Cheng Yun trembled and stood up, grabbing Chun Er's arm with both hands. Second young master can't die. He can't die. Master, save him. You must have a way to save him, right? You must have a way, Master Chun. Do you think I'm an immortal? Chun Er swung his arms. Your young master is dead. I can prolong his life, but at least he has to be alive. No, Master Chun. You have to save second young master. You have to save him. Cheng Yun's face turned pale. If second young master doesn't come back, we can't live anymore, really. Old master won't let me go. And won't let you go either. Master Chun. The old master loves the second young master the most. He will do anything for him. You see, the second young master obviously wasn't smashed to death. He must have been killed. The old master will definitely know. I said, Zhong Luochen is dead. He can't be saved. Leave me alone. No. Cheng Yun trembled. This is my only bridge. If it is broken, I can't go anywhere. No, you can't go. His expression became ferocious in an instant. His hands desperately pressed down on Chun Er's shoulders, and he actually roared. F***CK. Do you really think you're big shot? Chun Er kicked Cheng Yun's abdomen with his knee, making him bend over and retch painfully. If you want to die, keep it for yourself, Humph. Ignoring Cheng Yun, Chun Er looked around, trying to find a way out. Cheng Yun stared blankly at Zhong Luochen, who died with his eyes wide open. He sat down on the ground, as if he had lost everything in an instant. Gone. Nothing. Everything is gone. Second young master, I'm sorry. I have to go too. It's not that I don't want to save you. I also want to live. At most, when you become a ghost, I'll burn more things for you. You don't come to me. Chun Er suddenly thought of something, turning around and looking at Cheng Yun, who was out of his wits. What did you say? I said I also want to go. I also want to live. Cheng Yun trembled. Master Chun, don't leave me. I have money. I really have money. I have saved a lot of money these years. Not this sentence. The last sentence. Don't come to me. The first two sentences. Burn more things for me after I become a ghost. Got it. Chun Er turned around and walked to the side of Zhong Luochen's corpse. He squatted down and stretched out his fingers to press on Zhong Luochen's neck. Then, he opened Zhong Luochen's eyes and looked at his scattered pupils. Master Chun? At this time, Chun Er's eyes lit up and he said, I can't save the person, but I can try to save the ghost. Ghost? Chun Er nodded. Have you heard of raising ghosts? He just died. His 3 souls and 7 spirits should still be there. I can try to summon his soul, then raise his ghost with the method of raising ghosts. Cheng Yun was surprised and happy. Then, can he return to the living world? Have you watched too many movies? Have you heard that the dead can't be brought back to life? Chun Er snorted. This is yin and yang, the 5 elements, the law of heaven and earth. Even if there is a way to return to the living world, it will be punished by heaven. Do you know about the punishment of heaven? The kind that will turn into charcoal when struck by lightning. Besides, my master didn't teach me that. I can only summon his soul and raise ghosts. How about it? It's up to you. If you don't, I'll find a way out right now. Cheng Yun gritted his teeth. Master Chun, you do it. Chun Er nodded. He was also a decisive character. Hearing this, he directly bit his finger and drew a Tao seal with blood on Zhong Luochen's forehead. After that, he shouted, You lift his body. There is nothing here. I can't do anything. I have to leave here, go back to my villa. I need to find some props and perform the ritual. The villa that Chun Er inherited from Huang Chifa was not far, only a dozen kilometers away. Cheng Yun quickly nodded, swallowing his saliva and carrying Zhong Luochen's body. Master Chun, this way. I remember. There's an emergency passage here. Bang! A black shadow fell from the sky. Like a meteor, it crashed into the building from the top, breaking through 5 or 6 floors in a row before stopping. Black water spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was entangled by a few rigid roots. She looked at the broken holes above. Wang, who was standing on the upper floor, looking down. Your technique is too bad. Wang, who shook his head. You have a body full of monster energy, but don't know how to use it. What a waste. I only used less than 30% of your strength. At this moment, Blackwater's monster nature was floating. 2 sharp teeth were exposed from her black lips. Her pupils became vertical, and she struggled to stand up. Wang, who stretched out 5 fingers, aiming at Blackwater, and suddenly clenched them into a fist. If you don't show me some ability, I might really kill you. Don't let me down. She was about to remember something. His fighting spirit rose higher and higher. Wang, whose heart was filled with ruthlessness. At this moment, it was like a new sprout that was about to break through the soil. He had a feeling that he was about to recall something. As long as the demon in front of him could give him a serious look, as long as it was a satisfying battle, the monster cloud in the sky suddenly vibrated. The huge monster cloud whirlpool was spinning crazily, and an even more powerful and ruthless monster energy rushed to the sky from Blackwater. That huge demonic aura burst out like a strong wind, blowing the surrounding sand and stones like bullets, hitting Wang Hu's body. He suddenly laughed. Facing the huge demonic aura that was like a monstrous wave, there was a slight change in his body. The royal pattern that represented the white tiger flickered on his forehead. In the center of the monster energy whirlpool, Blackwater's vertical pupils turned into golden fragments. Her legs had disappeared, leaving only half of her black snake body. Behind her, the huge monster energy faintly condensed into a bigger shadow. It was also a snake head and a human body. The earth began to shake at this moment. It started from this building and spread to the surroundings. Descendants of Empress Hua, Wang Hu whispered to himself. He didn't know what this sentence meant, but he said it subconsciously, as if it was some kind of instinct hidden in his memory. The divine beast, white tiger blood in his body, seemed to be stimulated at this moment, and it surged crazily. Ha 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 ha! Wang Hu looked up to the sky and laughed wildly, looking forward to the next battle. The white tiger beast god transformation in his body was activated automatically and directly reached the second transformation level. A terrifying monster energy that didn't belong to Blackwater's monster energy burst out at this moment. The 2 peerless monster energies, with this as the center, spread the monster cloud in the sky in an instant. The earthquake also escalated at this moment. The 2 fierce monster energies collided crazily at this moment, and the upper floor of the building was instantly crushed into pieces. But their monster energies were still increasing, and they hadn't reached the peak yet. The real collision would happen when both of them increased their monster energies to the limit. Soon. But at this moment, when their monster energies were about to rise to the point where they had no choice but to explode, a chain of cold light directly broke the monster cloud in the sky and shot down instantly. That chain shot out and split into hundreds of chains in an instant, like a curtain of rain. They shot out together, directly ignoring the terrifying demonic power, and wrapped around Wang Hu and Blackwater respectively, directly crushing the terrifying demonic power of both of them. In the room, Luochio, who slept with his clothes on, slowly opened his eyes and said faintly, "This is the city it wants to protect." Chapter 1272. Around them, hundreds of chains with cold light were flowing. They seemed to have no end or no source, as if they came from the void. Whether it was Blackwater or Wang Hu, their limbs were all chained up. Both of them were lifted up as if they were criminals waiting to be executed. Blackwater lowered her head, and her vertical golden pupils regained clarity, followed by a sense of weakness. She knew that it was because the demon in her heart was aroused, and she used the power that she shouldn't have used. But she didn't expect that the power she didn't want to use didn't change the current situation at all. Instead, it seemed to be worse. What happened? She believed that she wasn't the only one who was confused. Even that ridiculously powerful one-armed guy was also confused. Wang Hu did have a feeling of swallowing something. He had felt that something was about to wake up in his body, but because of these chains, it was beaten back to its original form. Even so, his strong fighting spirit had disappeared, and now he was the blockhead that Bugao was familiar with. The demon clouds in the sky had dispersed. Blackwater looked up and saw the night sky with a moon and sparse stars. She tried to move, but the chains around her body didn't shrink the more she struggled. It even began to loosen. The chains began to flow again, and both her and Wang Hu were slowly put down and completely released. A cold wind blew, and Blackwater suddenly shivered. She looked around and saw that many buildings outside had collapsed. Not far away, there was a collapsed pedestrian bridge, and it fell down and hit a truck that was passing by. With this as the center, there were countless cries of horror within about a few kilometers. A chain came to Blackwater and slowly climbed up, like a spirit snake in a pot controlled by a flute. "I made this," Blackwater murmured, lowering her head. The sound made by the slowly moving chains was like a voice of blame. Blackwater opened her mouth. I won't do it again. I'm sorry." After that, the chains retreated little by little as if returning to the cave. Finally, only one chain was left, and it directly returned to the sky and disappeared in the night sky. On the other side, Wang Hu just stared at his palm blankly, frowning. A moment later, Blackwater looked at Wang Hu warily. She gritted her teeth and said, "Let's leave it at that. If you fight with me again, those chains will probably appear again. They seem to exist to protect this city." Wang Hu didn't say anything and just nodded silently. Although he didn't know the origin of the chains, he felt that it couldn't be faked. The fear that the chains brought to him was several times greater than when he faced Long Shura. The last time he faced Long Shura, he was forced to give up resisting. This time, he didn't even have the heart to resist. He couldn't even summon up the slightest desire to fight. "You can go." Wang Hu looked at Blackwater and said slowly, "Go back and train hard. You are very strong." With that, he jumped down from the remaining half of the building. Blackwater opened her mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. She just frowned. At this moment, a small black shadow suddenly rushed to her side. Pighead. Her frowning eyebrows slowly relaxed. She showed a gentle smile and hugged Pighead in her arms. She softly comforted him. "It's okay." The little piglet raised its head and looked around. It said timidly, "Sister, are we going to leave again?" Blackwater looked at the destruction of the few kilometers. Even though some people were injured, unexpectedly, there were no deaths caused by the earthquake. Perhaps it was because of the chains. "We probably are not liked by this city," she sighed faintly. She just didn't know where to go after leaving here. At this time, fire trucks and police cars were rushing through the streets of the city to rescue the victims. The building, which was the source of the earthquake, was dead silent at this time. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao successfully joined Bu Gao and rushed to find the injured people before half of the building collapsed. They also used a lot of powerful new talismans. They did not hesitate to use a lot of other props to support a defensive enchantment, which barely prevented everyone from being buried alive. It seems to have stopped. Hearing the sound, Bu Gao said in fear, "Outside. I'll go out and take a look," Wei Zidao said at this time. And then he turned over a wooden board and climbed up by feeling the way. Lu Mingho frowned and looked at the injured people gathered here. Why are there children here? A group of researchers, some were injured, some were lucky that they were not injured. They were huddled in a corner with a few children. They looked in horror, but didn't dare to speak. Bu Gao pulled Lu Mingho aside. "Senior, I found some information. Do you want to take a look?" Lu Mingho reached out to take it and looked at the documents that Bu Gao picked up. At first, he just looked at them roughly. But as he looked, his speed slowed down, and his expression gradually became dignified. Finally, Lu Mingho snorted. "Superpower research? Live experiments? Humph! How dare the Zhong family?" "Senior, this matter. How do you think we should deal with it?" Bu Gao asked carefully. It seemed that this time, it was not to take credit, but to encounter something bad? This matter, you can't deal with it, neither can I. Lu Mingho shook his head and said irritably, "Last time, when I reported Zhong Luoqin's contact with a superhuman, the higher-ups didn't react at all. This time, it's already like this. If the higher-ups still don't do anything, I'll quit. Then what about the people here? Bring them all back to do something." Lu Mingho thought and said, "We can't let these researchers and capable children enter society. We'll monitor them for now." After a while, Wei Zidao came back and said that the battle outside had stopped. He didn't find the big demon, but he met Wang Hu. But Wang Hu was in a dummy mode and didn't know anything. If it was just at the beginning, Wei Zidao planned to interrogate him properly. But after seeing Wang Hu's explosive combat power, he had to be careful. Who knew when Wang Hu would go crazy again? But it was strange that such a terrifying Wang Hu was casually beaten and scolded by Bu Gao. The two of them really didn't understand. Let's take them away first. Lu Mingho sighed. Go back and count how many fragments we have. I don't know how many people saw the demon cloud. I'm afraid it's not enough. Zidao, after sending them to the office, you go back to the branch tonight and explain the situation and ask for reinforcements. Or else I'll quit. Save my child. Save my child. Is anyone there? Someone fainted here. Do me a favor, move this pillar away. My boyfriend is being squashed. Please do me a favor. Please do me a favor. Ambulance. Ambulance. It was a mess. The sound turned into a mourning song and came little by little. Only half of the Zhong family's building was left. Luoqio looked at all this silently, still wearing the pajamas. Behind him, the servant girl held a set of clothes in her hand, but the master didn't change. Master, Luoqio slowly opened his eyes and said faintly, I'm thinking about how to better fulfill the contract with it in the future. Master, what do you plan to do? Yi came forward. Luoqio said, do you have any good ideas? Master has already thought about it. Yi said softly, just follow Master's idea. Luo, Chio muttered, if I only take action every time a disaster appears, I always feel slack, although it doesn't violate the content of the contract. However, it might be better to be on the safe side. Then let's make this place a vacuum zone. Master, are you planning to ban all activities of extraordinary power in this city? Luoqio shook his head. Keep it to the minimum. After all, there are so many monsters living here. If they can't use any power, probably tomorrow morning, many monsters will reveal their original forms. As long as it doesn't escalate to the level tonight, it won't cause much harm to the city. Naturally, there will be people who are responsible to deal with it. It will exceed the expenditure. Miss Servant Girl reminded him softly. Luoqio smiled. A breeze blew, and he said softly, I promised. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand towards the sky, opened his palm, and slowly pressed it down. The instant his palm was level with the horizon, with him as the center, it covered the entire city, and even the suburbs. The area that was once covered by the underground spirit vein was instantly in a state of vacuum. Okay. Boss Luo clapped his hands. Anyway, I can't sleep. Shall we go down and help? Just do your best like an ordinary person. Okay. Miss Servant Girl smiled, and then waved the clothes in her hand. Master, don't you want to change your clothes first? I'm sorry. This smile was a little bit strict. In the room, Rico opened the window and looked into the distance. The moment the monster cloud appeared, she naturally woke up from her sleep. She didn't know what was wrong with those two big monsters. They actually started a war in the city. Didn't they know that Shinryu lived here? Rico didn't notice the presence of Shinryu in the end. Instead, the two powerful and horrible monster powers suddenly disappeared without trace. It was a bit anticlimactic. Although she didn't take the initiative to contact the transcendence of Kelowna, she should at least know what happened. If there was no other way, she should be prepared to run away at any time. Thinking of this, Rico raised her small hand and called softly, Snow Fairy, help me to see what happened over there. A little bit of ice and snow began to condense in her palm, and then turned into a small ball. But when the Snow Fairy was about to take shape, it suddenly melted. Rico couldn't help but be startled. She secretly thought that she didn't forget the spell, and she was very satisfied tonight. Why didn't it work? She tried to summon the snow fairy again, but failed. 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 What's going on? Lizzie trembled in horror. She finally realized that her demonic power was still there, but she couldn't use it. Sleep. It must be an illusion. I'll be fine after I wake up. Without saying anything, Rico directly hid in the quilt, and even covered her head with the quilt. No matter what, the feeling of security that this family gave her was still there. Otherwise, she would really be scared to run away. At this time, Juefeng ran hard to the wall. At the moment when he was about to hit the wall, he jumped up resolutely and stepped on the wall. He planned to run along the wall all the way. However, he only took a few steps before his body fell back to the ground. Not only him, Lang Yong and Lang Wu beside him were also making the same attempt. Over and over again, the three demon wolves naturally fell to the ground again and again. What happened? My power? Wolf Lord, ours is also. At this time, Mo Xiaofei frowned and came over. No need to try. I can't fly either. Moreover, this is all I can do. With that said, Mo Xiaofei waved his hand, and a stone on the ground floated up staggeringly. Mo Xiaofei then shouted, and the stone shot out. The stone made a parabola about 2 meters away and then fell to the ground. What happened? Juefeng looked at Zixing puzzledly. In his impression, Zixing was the kind of person who knew a lot. Since returning from Mount Tai, she had never smiled. She always stayed by his side coldly and often asked him the same question. When are you going to leave for the plateau? Zixing shook her head. She had actually tried several times, but naturally, it was to no avail. The surrounding aura seems to be frozen. There is no problem with the monster power, but it seems to be isolated. It should be said that our bodies are isolated from the surrounding space, and the monster power can't be transmitted out at all. Lord Mo's mental power should be the same. This, Mo Xiaofei frowned and thought for a while. Is this like the so-called anti-magic space in the game? Anti-magic? Zixing was stunned, then nodded. It probably means the same thing. Just now, Mo Xiaofei looked at the night sky thoughtfully. This direction was the direction where he suddenly felt the appearance of the two terrifying forces. He originally planned to go and take a look, but just as he approached, he found that there were many collapsed places around. As a last resort, he turned to save people. Just as he was saving people, his ability suddenly disappeared. Windchaser soon found him, along with the other members of the Windchaser youth group. But everyone encountered the same situation. They couldn't use their ability. Is it related to the two terrifying monster powers before? Zixing was still thinking with her head down. Unfortunately, Lord Long is out. Otherwise, he should know what happened. Mo Xiaofei suddenly said at this time, maybe it's a good thing, brother? Juefeng was stunned. Mo Xiaofei said seriously, it's the same for everyone if we can't use our ability. In this way, there won't be a terrible disaster like just now, right? This is naturally a good thing for both the people living here and the city itself. With that said, Mo Xiaofei touched Juefeng's head and said with a smile, okay, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about the ability first. Maybe it's just a temporary problem. Let's save people first. Storm Chaser, the whole team has won. Yes, save people. Seeing Mo Xiaofei leading Juefeng and a few other little demons to join the rescue work on this street without any worry, Zixing couldn't help but frown. Lord Wolf, it's not necessarily a good thing to be so close to humans. Young Master, Lang Yong asked in a low voice. Zixing sighed and shook her head. You go and help Lord Wolf. There's no reason for the servant to stand and watch when the master is working. Aren't you standing and watching? After several people worked together to move a lamppost away, they sent a passerby who was crushed to the side. Mo Xiaofei reached out and wiped the sweat on his forehead at this time. Although he couldn't use his ability, his physical strength was much better than ordinary people because of the transformation of Shinryu's blood essence. Okay, the ambulance should be here soon. Let's go to other places to help. He looked at Juefeng and said, what's wrong? Juefeng lowered his head at this time, seeming to have some thoughts. He looked up and frowned. Big brother, are you really okay without your ability? What's wrong with me? Mo Xiaofei asked curiously. Zhui Feng said, but without your ability, you can't do many things. You can't fly in the future. Do you really not care? Well, it would be a lie to say that I don't care. Mo Xiaofei heaved a sigh of relief and then smiled. But I can't fly. Yin 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 P.S. 127th. Genius remembers this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1273. Humans had their own world, demons had their own world, and ghosts had their own world. It was supposed to be like this. But in this world, humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted. What humans didn't know was that there were mythical creatures around them, because they hid well and carefully followed certain rules. The sudden power restriction had no effect on humans. But the monsters who lived and worked in the city were so scared that they sat on the ground. Most of the monsters chose to work at night. Because there were relatively fewer humans working at night, the possibility of being exposed was lower. On the other hand, it helped them to absorb the essence of the moonlight at night. More than an hour ago, the collision of the two huge demonic auras made the monsters who worked at night in the city tremble. They were so scared that they didn't even dare to leave the place. Until later, they found that they had lost any means to use their powers. The only thing they could be thankful for was that this restriction didn't break the human-like state they maintained at this time. But losing the means to use their powers still made them very frightened. In just a short time, many human-like creatures gathered in front of the pet hospital. Of course, they were at the back door of the hospital, gathering herbs. The 2 words posted on the back door made the monsters who came spontaneously feel that things were strange. Although the owner of this place, Lord Long, did go out to gather herbs from time to time, they didn't think much of it on normal days. But tonight's strange situation happened. Let's go. This strange incident seems to be only in this city. A senior toad monster pushed up his glasses. I just talked to a cousin in another province. They seem to be fine. Well, my wife in the countryside is fine too. Fortunately, she is pregnant with her 2nd child. I sent her to the countryside to prevent miscarriage. Otherwise, I don't know if it will affect the fetus. My soul doesn't seem to be affected either. Other than demons, there were naturally some wandering ghosts. Most of the ghosts would not survive the first 7 days of their death before they would be worn down by the strong yang qi. Only in places with strong yin qi or those with great resentment before they died would they become malicious ghosts after death. They would survive the so-called first 7 days and then continue to wander the world. However, I feel as if I'm stuck in a swamp. I can't even walk through a wall. The one who spoke was a malicious ghost hiding in a famous haunted house in the city. Although it called itself this king, it was just an old ghost who had lived for decades. Fengdu Ghost City didn't even take it in. Old Zhang's toad, you are from the Longevity clan and have a lot of knowledge. Do you have any clues? I'm not sure. You youngsters don't think that old people know everything. Of course. Lay. The monsters and ghosts began to disperse bit by bit. Although they were still worried, they had learned from various sources that everything would return to normal if they could not leave the city. Therefore, they were not really worried to death. In the worst-case scenario, they could just leave this city. They stayed here only because Shinryu was here. Compared to other cities, they had more freedom here. But at the same time, they were under Shinryu's watch, so naturally, no one dared to do anything bad. Therefore, many of the monsters that lived here were canine monsters or those with weaker bodies, commonly known as Taiping dogs. Those who were ferocious in nature would not choose to stay in this place. If we can't use our abilities, doesn't it mean that no matter if we are humans, demons, or ghosts, we can only live a normal life? This idea suddenly appeared in the minds of many ghosts. Speaking of which, it was not a bad thing. First of all, they would not reveal their true forms. Even if they could not use their demonic powers, their bodies were still quite strong. Those who were originally engaged in high-intensity work would not be affected. It's so strange that we can still cultivate in this situation. What does this mean? Their demonic powers could still be slowly increased by absorbing the essence of the moonlight. Even the spiritual energy in the world was as usual. Moreover, because of the explosion of spiritual energy in Mount Tai, The intensity of spiritual energy had been increasing these days. They really couldn't figure it out. But there was one thing that some of the wise ones among the ghosts thought of. This place has become a safe zone. Old Zhang's Toad had studied economics in a human university. The house price is going to rise. Not long after, Toad from the Zhang family acted decisively. He didn't hesitate to use all of his family's assets to buy a piece of land in the suburbs of the city. Then, he built a huge hotel and named it the Peace Hotel. This was a story for later. Cheng Yun walked back and forth anxiously. This was the basement of Chun Er's villa. This Chun Er should have some unorthodox and evil abilities. The layout of this basement was very gloomy and scary. There were even many evil-looking idols. As for Chun Er, he was holding a wooden sword and wearing a weird yellow Taoist robe. Cheng Yun felt that it was similar to what Uncle Ling wore in Zombie Taoist Priest. If Chun Er was not only wearing a pair of large underpants, he would feel more at ease. Seeing Chun Er mumbling in the altar, Cheng Yun did not dare to disturb him. At the same time, he looked at Zhong Luochen, who was lying in the altar. Zhong Luochen's clothes had been stripped off, leaving only a pair of underpants. The bloodstains of the bloody hole in his chest had been wiped clean. But because of this wound made Cheng Yun even more afraid. Who could survive such a big hole in the chest? Zhong Luochen's body was covered with strange words written by Chun Er with cinnabar. He looked extremely weird. Especially, there seemed to be a chilly wind blowing in this place. This was obviously an underground secret room with no windows. Where did the wind come from? Heaven Spirit, Earth Spirit, the second son of the Zhong family, named Luochen, was born in the Wuqin year, Jiazi month, Xianu day, high hour. Return quickly. Chun Er spat out a mouthful of blood which splashed on the wooden sword. Then, he pointed the wooden sword at Zhong Luochen's forehead. Cheng Yun could not see what was going on, but he saw Chun Er yell again. Then, he flicked the wooden sword and took out a small cloth bag from the altar. The cloth bag seemed to be injected with something. In the blink of an eye, it began to swell out of thin air. Chun Er quickly put away the wooden sword in his hand, then grabbed the cloth bag and tied it up with a red rope. After that, Chun Er looked weak and sweaty. He could not stand firmly and could only slide down slowly by the altar. He gasped, "It's done. I've summoned him back." Young master is inside? Cheng Yun swallowed his saliva and stared at the cloth bag in Chun Er's hand. Chun Er called it a Chinquan bag. "Don't you trust me?" Chun Er snorted. "Master Chun, I didn't mean that." Cheng Yun hurriedly said, But I can't see him, right?" Chun Er was annoyed and waved at Cheng Yun. "Come closer. I'll open the yin-yang eye for you. Mortals can't see ghosts." "Ah, yin-yang eye. This. Don't worry, it's only temporary. You're not born with yin-yang eye." Chun Er said indifferently, "I'm not interested in opening it for you every time. Your young master has just been summoned back, and now he's muddle-headed. He needs to be nourished with yin qi every day. After a few days, he'll regain his consciousness. But anyway, he's already a little ghost. It's better to have a ghost than not." Cheng Yun shivered. Chun Er glanced at Cheng Yun's absent-minded appearance and suddenly said, "That's right, it's better to have a ghost than not. Although he can't come back to life, it's not impossible to let him appear in front of people in the future." "Is there really a way?" Cheng Yun hurriedly asked. "Master, don't lie to me. He can receive the incense of thousands of families and cultivate a golden body as a ghost." Chun Er rubbed his forehead and said seriously, "I heard from my master that ghosts can indeed become a kind of strange ghost immortal with this method. But it's difficult to receive the incense of thousands of families. It's not just about burning incense, but also the devout worship of believers and the power of will of all living beings. And it takes a long time. And when the golden body is cultivated, it'll attract a heavenly tribulation. If he can't pass it, his soul will be scattered and he'll be doomed eternally. Even the almighty immortal can't save him. It's better to have a way than not." Cheng Yun took a deep breath. "Master Chun, open the yin-yang eye for me and let me see young master." Chun Er didn't say much. He took some willow leaves and burned them into talisman water. Then he stuck the willow leaves on Chung Yun's eyelids. Of course, it was useless for ordinary people to do this. It still required a little bit of Dharma power. Chen only learned a little from Wang Qifa, but he was very diligent in cultivating Dharma power. It was just that he didn't have the aptitude to do so. His magic power had always been in a negligible state. At most, it was at the level of opening the yin-yang eye. However, in the past month, his negligible magic power had made a breakthrough and actually allowed him to cultivate a little bit of magic power. Otherwise, he was afraid that he wouldn't have been able to summon spirits. Well, you could try to talk to your young master. Chen finished wiping his eyelids. I'm tired. I'll take a shower and have a rest. Wait, master, I didn't see anything? Chen was stunned. He frowned and walked back. He wiped Chung Yun's eyes with the willow leaves again and murmured, "It's done this time. I can't see anything." Chen didn't believe it and continued wiping. "What about this time? I can't see anything. What about this time? Can you see anything?" "No," Aster say. "Try again, come on. Look again. Do you feel anything?" "I feel it. Master, my eyes hurt. You're wiping them. I understand now, you're a fraud." "Wait, where's my Dharma power?" Chen lowered his head and thought for a while. Then he said slowly, "I must have used up all my Dharma power. Let me recover for a few days. I really need to summon back your young master. If you don't believe me, you can hold this Chinquin bag at night and think about your young master. He should come to you in your dreams." As he said, he threw the Chinquin bag to Chung Yun. Chung Yun had to take it with suspicion. Only half of the building was left. On the ground, large pieces of concrete were piled up. This was the scene of an earthquake. In the dark basement of the building, the original research institute was completely destroyed. Everywhere was blocked. Even the emergency lights were no longer shining. It was a completely dark space. At this moment, a large black cocoon slowly emerged from the bottom. Before the battle between Wang Hu and Blackwater, he felt a great danger approaching. Therefore, he didn't care about the life and death of the people in the Research Institute and directly dived into the ground to complete the transformation of his body. The process of changing the body was unexpectedly smooth. The degree of smoothness was beyond 24's imagination. This bald young man's body was simply a perfect container, specially made for the transfer of consciousness. He easily destroyed the little bit of consciousness left by the bald young man and officially entered the body. What made 24 pleasantly surprised was that the body seemed to contain even more potential compared to when he was investigating it. If it was said that in the original subworld, he was at the peak of the Master Mage domain, then this body had the potential to be at the peak of the Master Warrior domain. Could it be that I have to walk the path of dual cultivation of magic and martial arts? He slowly opened his eyes, but at this moment, the large black cocoon suddenly dispersed. Mr. 24 was stunned. Then he blinked his eyes and quickly came back to his senses. The joy of changing a good body instantly disappeared without a trace. Because his body was stuck in the cement and couldn't get out. 24 desperately found that although this body was very strong, it was obviously not strong enough to help him get out of the cement. What was even more desperate was that he couldn't use his strength. Finally, after trying for dozens of minutes, this immortal conjurer from the subworld said the first sentence after having a new body. "Help!" At 1:49 a.m. Today, a local earthquake occurred in the XX section of the city. In the morning, Nanny Rin held a glass of water in one hand and a toothbrush in the other. Watching the morning news without blinking, she hurriedly walked out of the bathroom after hearing the news. Damn, was there an earthquake last night? When she woke up, Nanny Rin didn't feel anything. Morning, Sister Rin. She saw Lizzie walking out of the room weakly, holding a pillow in her hand, and then there were deep dark circles under her eyes. What's wrong with you? Didn't you sleep last night? Last night, Lizzie laughed twice. She couldn't say that she covered her head last night. The more she wanted to sleep, the more she couldn't sleep. I'm hungry. I need to replenish my energy, otherwise I will die. Only delicious food can save my scared soul. Well, where's breakfast? Oh, there's no breakfast today. Luaccio went out early. There are biscuits in the cabinet. You can eat whatever you want. Too much. You don't even have a shop that sells bread downstairs. Lizzie tried hard, and the pillow fell to the ground. I don't live here anymore. Nanny Rin tore open the packaging of the wafer cake and threw it. Lizzie jumped and caught it with her mouth. Yoshi, Yoshi, good girl. Chapter 1274. 20 neatly dressed young men stood in 5 rows at this time. They raised their heads and puffed out their chests. Their eyes were focused. In front of them, Lu Mingho's mood was a little better. Finally, the branch was willing to send some people to help. Wei Zidao rushed to the branch overnight. Not only did he bring back the support, but he also brought back a large number of fragments. But what made Lu Mingho feel strange was that this morning, except for the overwhelming discussion about the earthquake disaster on the internet, there was nothing about the monster cloud. Obviously, there was no space for the agency to cover it up. But this matter was really not mentioned by anyone. Lu Mingho didn't know whether it was good or bad. He shook his head secretly. Brother Hao, there's a very strange thing. All our equipment is malfunctioning. What happened? I don't know. It was fine at first, but when we came back, it suddenly malfunctioned. Wei Zidao frowned. He had just arrived. The electronic equipment used normally is fine, but all the Taoist equipment can't be used. In addition, the Taoist technique can't be used, but the magical power is still there. Lu Mingho was shocked. He and Bu Bugao were busy dealing with the guys brought back from the research room. They didn't pay attention to this at night. His magical power was still there, but he didn't use any Taoist technique. It seemed that if he didn't use it once, he wouldn't find out the strangeness. Lu Mingho tried it subconsciously. He just used a simple little Taoist. The magical power was output normally, but it didn't bring any effect. He was really shocked. Wei Zidao quickly said, "It seems that it's just this city." I called back and asked, "Everything is normal in the branch. Except for this city, the surrounding area is also normal. The vacuum zone of the supernatural?" Lu Mingho suddenly thought of such a word. The vacuum zone of transcendence was a topic that the agency had been researching for a long time, but it was just a hypothetical existence. It was said that the greater ray buried under the capital had the ability to release all its power in an instant and then create a temporary vacuum zone of power within the capital. Of course, this was just hearsay, and no one had ever tried it before. What did the branch say? Wei Zidao said, "Soon there will be a commissioner to investigate the situation. I will bring people back to support you first." In addition, regarding the children and researchers in the research lab, the branch wanted to bring them back first. This group of people will be divided into 2 groups later and will be responsible for escorting them to the branch. That's the only way. Lu Mingho nodded. What Wei Zidao brought back was only this. There was no more explanation, especially regarding the Zhong family. Although the time was very short, there was no news at all. Is he still planning to adopt an ambiguous attitude towards these aristocratic families? Or is there something else going on in the dark that I don't have enough authority to know about? Another thing was that the person in charge of the superpower research lab, Zhong Luochun, had gone missing. Brother Hao, what do we need to do now? Lu Mingho thought for a while. Since the vacuum zone is only limited here, we shouldn't panic too much. What we need to do now is to investigate whether no one saw the appearance of the demonic cloud last night, or if they saw it but didn't dare to say it. This is a lot of work. Even if we have support, it's not like we don't have enough people. Let's do as much as we can. Rescue work? Isn't there still the local government? Lu Mingho shook his head and said, "We only have a dozen people. We can't help much even if we want to. It's better to investigate the background of this matter." Right. Later, you go and apply for the Zhong family's building. Don't let anyone touch it, and don't clean it. The things inside can't be known to ordinary people. I'm afraid that when the rescue team cleans it, they will dig out the things inside. I got it. Wei Zidao nodded. In short, leave the building to dry first, and then wait for our people to arrive. With that, Wei Zidao pulled Lu Mingho to the side and whispered, "Brother Hao, where's Wang Hu?" Lu Mingho also whispered, "He's with Bu Bugao, looking after the people and children in the research institute." Wei Zidao said, "Wang Hu's strength is too strong. You saw it last night. But his details, I feel that it's different from the information. Lu Mingho said, when you went back to the branch, did you mention Wang Hu? Wei Zidao shook his head. Didn't you tell me not to talk about Wang Hu first? So after I went back, I didn't say anything. I just said that there were two mysterious big demons fighting in the city. Lu Mingho lit a cigarette and blew on it, then said slowly, the administration is very strict with the household registration of the demons and the people who are going to work in the administration soon. Although they only belong to the logistics team, they can't be so careless. You saw Wang Hu's strength. Is such a strong demon really just a demon less than 100 years old? Brother Hao, what do you mean? I suspect that someone in our department forged Wang Hu's information or modified Wang Hu's information. He may have already been on the list of big demons. But why would they do that? I'm not sure. Lu Mingho could only shake his head helplessly. However, if it really becomes a transcendent vacuum zone, there's no need to worry about Wang Hu suddenly losing control. I think we have to keep him in this vacuum zone even more. Capital City Administration Headquarters. Special Operations Division, Chief's Office. In front of a simple desk, Yin Xiaoxi looked down at several documents. These documents were sent back urgently. He was not the only one who had a copy. A few people in the administration headquarters who held higher positions than him had probably received a copy as well. Human experiments, the Zhong family of... Yin Xiaoxi frowned and muttered, first, the Zhao family was restless, then the Zhong family. These four families are really getting more and more active. But compared to these things, that was the content of another document. Obviously, Yin Xiaoxi was more concerned about the content of this document. It's actually a transcendent vacuum zone. Does it really exist? Yin Xiaoxi was deep in thought. Is it man-made or formed naturally? Suddenly, there was a knock on the office door, and a staff member walked in respectfully. Chief, the deputy director would like to invite you over for an urgent meeting. Got it. Yin Xiaoxi nodded and closed the document on the table. Then, he clipped it to his waist, turned off the lights, and went out. They put on uniforms with the names of certain trade unions and shuttled through the streets of the earthquake-stricken areas to help with the transportation of supplies. Some of them were also giving food, clothes, and drinking water to the victims. Most of them were volunteers from various organizations. Of course, some of them were the main forces of the government. In a black MPV in a corner of the disaster area, Zhang Xingrui was discussing something with the elders in her family. This time, old Madame Zhang was also the one who led the rescue efforts. As one of the leaders of the trade unions in the South, the wealthy were very kind and generous under old Madame Zhang's leadership. Their wives also took the lead and gave up on the poker game. Zhang Xingrui looked through the car window and stared at the madams who were busy working outside. She was neither happy nor displeased. Zhong Luochen has gone missing? Yes, we couldn't contact him after the accident. Zhong Luochen's property building is in the center of the disaster area, and half of it has already cracked. This morning, I contacted the entertainment company, but could only find a few managers. They didn't know where Zhong Luochen was, and so did Manager Chung. Was he still in the building when the accident happened? Zhang Xingrui said in surprise. If so, Zhang Xingrui didn't continue to talk about what happened after that. Most of the time, the aristocratic families didn't talk about other aristocratic families. Most of the time, they were able to figure out the general trend of an aristocratic family. The Zhang family had some connections in this aspect. Firstly, old Madame Zhang and old Master Zhang were old friends. Last year, the two families even almost got married, but this thing was not done. Even so, the two families had cooperated before and invested in an entertainment company together. But Zhang Xingrui didn't care much about the business of this company. Basically, she let Shi Shiji handle it for her. Zhong Luochun might be in danger, otherwise he wouldn't have disappeared and couldn't be contacted. But Zhang Xingrui, it didn't worry too much. After all, she didn't have a good impression of Zhong Luochun. Of course, she didn't hate him either. Generally speaking, they were acquaintances. Zhang Xingrui shook her head and said, the entertainment company should operate as usual. The Zhong family should get the news about Zhong Luochun soon. Let's see what old Master Zhong is going to say. Grandma is much better these days, and she's more energetic. Uncle, sure, please don't mention it. I'm afraid that she'll be tired if she worries too much. I know. Sure, Shaji smiled. Miss, you're becoming more and more sensible. Whoever marries you in the future will be really lucky. He cared more about Zhang Qingrui finding someone she liked, rather than being the sacrifice of the family's marriage. Besides, Zhang Qingrui didn't need to rely on marriage with the wealth of the Zhang family. It was just that old Madame Zhang was a little obsessed last year. Fortunately, she had gotten over it. Zhang Qingrui felt it was still too early for her to talk about marriage, so she smiled and skipped it. Well, I'll go downstairs to help. Look, Song Ying has shown up. As the representative of the Song family, Song Ying naturally had to show up for the Chamber of Commerce's operation this time. Basically, Song Ying represented the Song family in donating $30 million in supplies for the disaster relief this time. It was said that she was also planning to participate in the reconstruction activities. However, there should be a government bidding activity at that time. The company needed a good reputation. Song Ying could do some activities at that time. Thinking of this, Zhang Qingrui put on the printed clothes and came to Song Ying's side. Sportswear and sneakers were different from those rich ladies who still wore skirts and high heels. Song Ying found Zhang Qingrui's appearance was much more pleasing to the eye. What did you dye your hair this color? She asked in surprise. Don't I look good? Song Ying shrugged. My hair has always been this color. I just dyed it black before. Zhang Qingrui asked curiously, why did you suddenly change it? Song Ying said casually, I said I want to be a good girl, but then I found I couldn't do it, so I changed it back. Do you believe me? Zhang Qingrui smiled, but didn't comment. She looked around and asked casually, how many materials did you send? Huh? What did you see? Seeing Zhang Qingrui's surprised look, Song Ying also looked over. Huh? In fact, there were all kinds of people in the crowd, including the victims, the volunteers, the police, and so on. They were all doing their own things. In the crowd, Song Ying and Zhang Qingrui both fixed their eyes on a young man in casual clothes who was also wearing the uniform of a street volunteer team. Luoqiu. Luoqiu was holding a broom, cleaning up the garbage on the street. In the end, Song Ying was the more proactive person. She subconsciously took a step forward and then stopped. At this time, a blonde girl came to Luoqiu, unscrewing a bottle of water for him, and then carefully wiping Luoqiu's cheeks and other places with a handkerchief. Missing couldn't move at all, and her face was cloudy. I saw his girlfriend again. Behind her, Zhang Qingrui's voice was faintly discernible. Song Ying turned around and frowned. Do you know her? Zhang Qingrui shook her head. No, I just saw her once or twice. But she's really beautiful, and probably all men like her. Song Ying glanced over the crowd and muttered, Stupid head, you lied to me. You said she was as beautiful as a black tulip. But this is clearly golden. What? Zhang Qingrui looked at her in surprise. Miss Ying snorted and grabbed Miss Zhang's arm, pulling her, Come on, let's go to the spa. Huh? Is this for disaster relief? Whatever. I've taken out 30 million yuan from my private savings. Why should I be the general manager? Zhang Qingrui smiled bitterly and simply let her drag her away. Although the rich had a lot of assets, there are not many people who could take out 30 million yuan without frowning. Most of them only had 100,000 yuan, 50,000 yuan, or hundreds of thousands of yuan, but they had already donated a good name back. The volunteer activities lasted for 2 days. When Luoqiu was doing volunteer work, he met many people he had met before, those who were still living happily. During the disaster relief, he saw many colors. It could be described as a large-scale state of kindness. He kind of liked it. Humans always learn to help each other when they are in trouble. On the evening of the second day, Luoqiu and Miss Maid came to the city's park. In the innermost part of the park, they planted a small seedling that had already sprouted. The seed was left by the customer with the spiritual vein, and it didn't germinate until now. After putting down the soil to give the seedling a stable place to grow, Luoqiu sat down. He sat on the left side, and Yu Yi on the right side. Luoqiu smiled. You gave birth to the prosperity of this land. So now, let this land give you a stable home. It didn't leave until the afterglow of the sunset disappeared in the horizon and the moon rose. It was still wet at night, and the seedling was glistening with dew. Yin 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 P.S. Sad Face 2/27. Chapter 1275. Xinyuan's Secret Land, the Royal Palace. In the princess's bedroom. On the soft couch, Su Zijuan only wore a cool black nightgown with straps. Her two straight legs were crossed. She was holding a luminous glass cup with spirit beast blood in one hand and resting her chin on the other. In front of her, Jessica, who was wearing a purple gold phoenix dress, was sitting upright. She had been sitting upright for 2 hours. All of a sudden, Jessica's shoulder lowered a little. At the same time, a rattan fell on her waist. Normally, she wouldn't feel any pain with her current body. But the fact was, it was very painful and burning. The one who held the rattan was Lord Chichikamaya of Xinyuan Palace. He said sternly, "Listen, once there's a dispute in the imperial court, it will last for at least a few hours. As a princess, you can't ruin the royal etiquette." Of course, Jessica couldn't say anything. She couldn't disobey Su Zijuan's order. But the ancient etiquette she had been learning these days almost drove her crazy. She even had to learn oracle bone inscriptions. Su Zijuan's bite gave her the ability to live forever and didn't even need a rest. Obviously, this ability was used to its fullest. Jessica was only free for about half an hour of 24 hours a day. When she talked with Yi Yin about his motherland, Yin said that his motherland was a country that liked to take exams and study. It was a tradition of thousands of years. It was simply the dregs of the tradition. That's enough. Su Zijuan suddenly sat up straight. "What are you waiting for? When will you be done? Should I go out of the palace or not?" Chichikamaya said lightly, "Your Highness, Miss Jessica's sitting class will end in 2 hours. Then there's walking class and studying at night." Before he finished his words, Su Zijuan threw out the precious luminous glass cup, right at Master Turtle's face. The old turtle calmly reached out and took it. "Princess, this old servant thinks it's better to be more appropriate. If outsiders find out that Miss Jessica is pretending to be you, the Xinyuan Palace will definitely be in a mess. How long will it take?" Su Zijuan frowned. "I think it'll take about 8 to 10 years. With Miss Jessica's IQ, it should be enough," Chichikamaya said seriously. Jessica rolled her eyes. Su Zijuan rolled her eyes. Chichikamaya said seriously, "Let's continue the class." Su Zijuan suddenly waved her hand. "Chichikamaya, come here, I have something to tell you. Remember to keep it a secret." Seeing that Su Zijuan set up a bounded domain with her monster power, Gue Chini was startled, and then walked forward. "Princess, what's the matter? You turn around first." Su Zijuan gestured with her hand. Chichikamaya had to obey her with confusion, but he had a bad feeling in an instant, and it came true in an instant. He felt that his head was hit by something, and then there was nothing. Jessica opened her eyes wide, looking at Su Zijuan, who was standing on the soft couch with the Xinyuan deity killing sword in her hand. She was speechless. Su Zijuan raised the deity killing sword in her hand and said seriously, "My deity killing sword can kill fatuous emperors and slanderers. You're just knocking me out. You're giving me face. It's the emperor's sword that can kill fatuous emperors and slanderers. I'm not well educated, but I just passed the exam last night. Don't lie to me." Jessica rolled her eyes again. Su Zijuan took out a suitcase from under the soft couch and said without hesitation, "You keep it, I'll go out. The Mirage Dragon Pearl is in Chichikamaya's hands. He knows what to do." "Master, please take me with you." Jessica plucked up her courage and said. Su Zijuan said indifferently, "You still have to stay here and replace me for a while. Remember, you have to drink at least 5 cups of spirit beast blood every day. And don't use your supernatural thunder power when your body can't bear it. Remember this if you don't want to die." "Master, I'm going to take revenge." Jessica shook her head. Su Zijuan said, "I'll take revenge for you, your husband. Bah, I'm leaving. Stay here obediently. It's okay if you want to come out. When you pass the Golden Sword General's test, I'll consider coming back to pick you up." Jessica still wanted to chase after Su Zijuan. However, Su Zijuan turned her hand and slapped her with a strand of demon power. She was pressed onto the cushion and couldn't move at all. She could only watch Su Zijuan leave. Jessica heaved a sigh slowly. Chichi Kamaya rubbed his head and sat up slowly. Alas, this girl doesn't know how to take care of the elderly. Master Tortoise, aren't you? Jessica was stunned. Chichi Kamaya stood up slowly and said expressionlessly, "Continue with the class. You have to sit here for another 2 hours. And you have to take out 4 hours every day to receive swordsmanship instruction. Try to pass the Iron Sword General's test within 2 months." I don't have 4 hours. Time is like breasts. You'll get them if you squeeze them. Do you know what the time in the Xinyuan Palace is like? Don't talk nonsense. Sit down. The rattan fell. In the Second Technical Research Institute of the administration's headquarters in the capital city. Outside the observation room, through the specially strengthened glass, a group of researchers were carefully observing the things inside. At this moment, a forklift carried a huge iron cage into the room. There was a strong bull in the cage. "Director Pu, everything's ready." The director of the Second Research Institute, Pu Yoli, who was about 40 years old and had a kind face, stepped forward and said with a smile, "Then let's start." In the center of the observation room, a table slowly extended from the ground. There was also a sealed metal box on the table. Suddenly, the box slowly opened. Inside was an ugly and strange ball of flesh. Although the ball of flesh was alive, it seemed to be very slow. At the same time, the liquid nitrogen that was originally filled with the metal box also dispersed little by little. When the temperature rose to a certain degree, the small mass of flesh moved. It jumped down from the table and crawled towards the bull in the iron cage like a worm. The people outside carefully observed this scene. Finally, the mass of flesh crawled to the front of the bull. In the blink of an eye, the ball of meat stretched out like a huge net. While the bull was panicking, it directly wrapped around the bull and turned it into a huge ball of meat. At this time, it was like a huge stomach constantly wriggling and then shrinking little by little. The strong bull was digested little by little until the mass of flesh shrank to a size that was only slightly bigger than before. After that, the mass of flesh seemed to be unsatisfied. It suddenly jumped up and directly hit the glass wall. It stuck to the glass wall, right in front of everyone's eyes. Quickly inject nitrogen." A large amount of cold air was injected into the room. After a while, the mass of flesh lost its stickiness like frozen chewing gum and fell from the glass wall. Unbelievable! This time, it actually swallowed a bull and completely digested it. Its cell composition is simply... We have done experiments on various small animals before. It can not only digest animals, but also extract animal characteristics. This is simply a versatile cell. Director Pu, if we can understand its core principle, we can definitely come up with a result that can completely suppress Dr. Zhao's research results. Director Pu? However, the kind Director Pu kept looking at the stiff mass of flesh on the ground, as if he didn't hear the words of his subordinates. He just muttered to himself, "What a beautiful creature. I don't know if it can digest the monster race." There are a lot of monster race materials in the material room. Do you want to give it a try? How many more surprises can you give me? Fanaticism. 9 o'clock in the evening. Attention to passengers going to London. Please bring your luggage. The broadcast sounded in the airport hall. In front of the security gate, Nanny Wren was holding a tissue and wiping her nose. "Don't eat outside. It's not good to mix with shady people. I heard that foreign students are very bad. If there are black boys looking for you, you must not go out with them at night. Also, if someone offers you cigarettes, remember to refuse. It may be marijuana." And chattering. Only Ren Xiling and Lizzie sent them off. Lizzie was dragged by Nanny Wren. Luochio looked at the woman who usually didn't cry when she was in pain. Now, her tear ducts suddenly developed, so he let her chatter here. He looked at Lizzie and said, "Miss Lizzie, you drive later?" "Oh, okay." Lizzie, who was looking at the restaurant sign in the airport hall, responded casually, "Well, I have to go through the security check." Ren Xiling wiped her tears again, then clamped Luacio's arm and pulled him away from Yi. Then she opened her windbreaker like an Annie who sold pirated AV discs on the street more than a decade ago, and took out something like a protective talisman. "What's this?" "I asked for it," Nanny Wren said mysteriously. "It was hard to ask for it from Avalokitesvara. Take it carefully. I won't tell you even if I leave." Luacio shook his head. Wren Xiling glared and patted on Luacio's forehead, saying angrily, "Just take it. Don't talk so much nonsense. Remember, you have the obligation to carry on the Luo family's ancestral line." She was probably the only one in the world who could talk to Boss Luo like this. Miss Maid looked at them, covering her mouth and smiling slightly. "I really have to go." Luacio avoided answering. Rin Xiling had no choice but to put the talisman into Luacio's pocket and zipped up the bag. "Remember to call home often. I will come back during the summer vacation." Rin Xiling gave up on Luacio, then pulled Miss Maid aside and began to whisper something in her ear. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps. In fact, a familiar voice could be heard from far away. It was long purple hair. "Fortunately, I made it in time." "How do you know my time?" Luacio looked at Song Ying curiously. He remembered that he didn't tell her the specific time of departure. Song Ying was probably in a hurry, so he could see that she was holding her breath. Her assistant Ziyun was behind her. "Young Master Chiu, have you forgotten who owns the airline company you took?" Ziyun was secretly happy at this time. "Miss and Ms. Zhang can ask when you will leave." "I want to leave simply," Luacio replied. "They can come, but I can't." Song Ying snorted and glanced at the blonde woman behind Luacio. "So what if you have a girlfriend?" "I'm your elder sister." "That's not it." Luacio shook his head. "I really don't want to bother you, but thank you for coming to see me off. I will remember it." "Who asked you to remember this?" Miss Ying gritted her teeth at this time. Then she opened her arms and hugged him. At the same time, she put her face on Luacio's left cheek, and her lips touched his cheek. Luacio was a little surprised. Song Ying said casually, "Don't think too much. It's just a simple kiss." But Nanny Run and the others who had noticed Miss Ying's arrival, especially Nanny Run, at this time, covered her mouth with her small hand, instinctively showing a happy expression. "I didn't think too much." Luacio smiled slightly, imitating Song Ying's appearance. He hugged her gently and touched her cheek. "Take good care of yourself." Song Ying was stunned. She was so stunned that she couldn't react. She could only subconsciously cover her face. Seeing this, Nanny Rin came up wittily, muttering that she also wanted to kiss Luacio. She simply kissed him and then let him go with satisfaction. Later, Boss Luo looked at Lizzie casually. Lizzie quickly waved her hand and took a step back. "I'll pass. Just remember to send me some delicious food." "You can do this?" Ziyin was suddenly amazed by this Master Chiu. She admired him so much. "How'd he do it?" Missing obviously came here to watch the show. Under Song Ying's silly and Nanny Ren's reluctant gaze, Luacio and Yu Yi walked into the security channel. "Since we're leaving, don't be in a daze. Do you want to have a drink?" Song Ying suddenly felt someone put a hand on her shoulder. She looked back and found that it was Run Xiling. Nanny Ren squinted and smiled. "You drink and can't be mine. This woman is so cheap. I'm so angry. Let's drink. Who's afraid of who?" In the night sky, a figure moved quickly in the clouds with a suitcase in her hand. It was Miss Su Zijuan, who successfully left the palace without any accidents. "It's strange. We're almost there, but I don't feel the aura of the old woman. Is she not here?" Miss Su Zijuan muttered, but her speed didn't change at all. Suddenly, Miss Su Zijuan blinked and only felt that her body fell all the way down, down, down. Blink, blink. Finally, bang. Miss Su Zijuan kissed the earth intimately. Yin 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 P.S. Volume 11 End. Chapter 1276. On the sea, a super luxurious ship was slowly sailing in the Pacific Ocean. This was a cruise ship that would soon sail to the island nation called Japan. On the uppermost floor of the cruise ship, the melodious sound of a piano drifted along with the sea breeze. Sometimes seagulls flew by in groups. Young girls and beautiful ladies were attracted by the attractive middle-aged man playing the piano, and their hearts were captivated. The sound of the piano was so wonderful, as if it could touch the softest part of everyone's heart, gently teasing them. Only a woman in a black dress, who even under the umbrella of the tea table, still insisted on holding the black umbrella, which was particularly strange. Even so, the table next to this woman in a black dress was full of people, and almost all of them were men. She and the middle-aged gentleman playing the piano, one on the left and one on the right, caused this strange phenomenon at the same time, which was quite interesting. The sound of the piano stopped at some point. The young girls and beautiful ladies woke up from a dream, but they couldn't see the middle-aged gentleman full of beauty. They couldn't help but show a melancholy expression. As for the beautiful woman holding the black umbrella, she seemed to have disappeared at some point. Ah, the sea is so wonderful. So many beautiful ladies are sad for me. I am really a sinner. On the lower deck, at the stern part of the ship, the middle-aged gentleman looked at the endless sea and made such a sigh. Oh, I think the reason why those women are surrounding you is purely because you are wearing 10 diamond rings that can kill people, my dear Wolfgang. Miss Charlotte, you are always so humorous. The middle-aged gentleman, Wolfgang with a lot of gold, smiled, revealing his neat white teeth. Charlotte frowned. You don't seem to be worried that we can't find Lucifer? Do you know how long we have been looking for him? Almost 3 months. Wolfgang calculated the time. It's really a wonderful journey. Charlotte sneered. You also know that it's 3 months. Do you know that in these 3 months, you've already climbed into the bed of 10 women and almost seduced an underage girl to give herself to you? Why is it that compared to us, you're more like a demon? This is prejudice. Shaking his head, Wolfgang disagreed. Creativity requires inspiration, and love is the greatest source of inspiration. You should believe that we like each other from the bottom of our hearts. But 7 of them loved their husbands or boyfriends very much before you appeared. Charlotte maintained her cold smile. If Lucifer were here, I would definitely advise her to give you the position of hell. The pillar of lust should be very suitable for you. I think, he said seriously, even the banshees of hell have the right to pursue true love. If it wasn't for the fact that she knew she couldn't beat him, she would have torn him apart and thrown him into the water to feed the fish. Charlotte revealed a sad expression and sighed softly. Madam Charlotte, according to your guidance, we started from South America and went all the way to the east. It seems that there is no result. Wolfgang restrained himself. I think it would be better for you to do another divination. Wolfgang had heard about Charlotte's divination. Charlotte, who was known as the guiding light, had a very accurate success rate in divination in a certain aspect. It's the east. Charlotte was expressionless. How could it not be divined? Every day it would hide and secretly divine, but every time it would point to the west. Charlotte, who was more or less aware of her own divination abilities, couldn't tell if it was the east or west. However, even if it was the east, she could still reach the west if she kept going down the road, right? Anyway, as a devil, she didn't lack time. It was just that she felt a little lonely without Lucifer by her side. Wolfgang was obviously not a good companion. Shoo! He suddenly made a shushing gesture and then listened carefully. Charlotte frowned. Wolfgang stopped listening and said with an interesting expression, Beautiful Madam Charlotte, I seem to hear 2 very powerful forces colliding on the sea. 2 forces? Charlotte was surprised. Wolfgang said, It's almost the limit of the subworld. Charlotte looked at the direction that Wolfgang pointed and thought. On the sea, the sword chi broke the sea and drew a huge crack that was hundreds of meters long. After all, they were on the sea. No matter how hard they tried, they could only make the sea water a little murkier. 2 figures were tossing and turning between the waves. Sometimes the sword chi was rampant, and sometimes huge waves were surging. Vixen, how many times have I told you that I don't know where your master is? You've chased me all the way from Kelowna to the sea. Isn't that enough? You're a flirtatious vixen with a teacher fetish. The woman in white who was holding the green lotus sword song didn't pay any attention to her. She kept thrusting her long sword, and each time, the extremely sharp green sword chi shot out. Gong Fanqing gradually became angry. She didn't want to fight with Qin Shiyu to the death. It was really not worthwhile for both of them to be injured. But she couldn't stand this vixen's continuous improvement. How long had it been since she easily suppressed her opponent to a tie? It's true that you're a teacher fetish. You've really reincarnated and cultivated again and again. I've never seen anyone like you who has self-detonated the realms of so many lifetimes in order to improve the strength of this life before you've achieved the unity of Tao. Do you know that you can't reincarnate anymore? If you die in this life, you'll reach the end. Is it worth it for Tai Bai? It's useless to say more. Gong Fanqing was so depressed that she wanted to spit out blood. Although Qin Shiyu had self-detonated the cultivation of so many lifetimes to improve the strength of this life, she was only at the same level as her, so she wasn't afraid. But if the Green Lotus Sword Song was included, speaking of which, after leaving Kelowna, she was already unable to defeat Qin Shiyu. Do you really think I'm easy to bully? Gong Fanqing was furious at this moment. You clearly know that it's useless to chase me, but you're still so obsessed. Are you really afraid that Tai Bai has died and you want to use me to overcome your inner demon? Today, I'll do closed-door training for 100 years to heal my wounds, and I'll teach you that I'm still your grand aunt. Humph! Gong Fanqing made a madra with both hands, using her lifetime's unique skills such as the Sea Emperor Madra, Buzhou Mountain Madra, Akalanatha Madra, Burning Sky Madra, and Reincarnation Madra. Instantly, the 5 madras combined into one, and the sea area surged with huge waves at the same time. Qin Shiyu was fearless. She held her sword high in the air, looking like she could break the blue sky with her sword. The two terrifying forces collided, and the sea level within several kilometers sunk by half a foot in an instant. Then, huge waves surged out from all directions. Oh, my God! It's so nice to not have to worry about the world's will. Looking at the huge waves surging towards them from afar, Wolfgang and Charlotte, who had chased them all the way from the cruise ship, sighed with emotion. I didn't expect there to be such a strong person in the mortal realm. Charlotte, who was holding an umbrella, frowned. She felt that this trip to the east was really inauspicious. Should they turn back? Look, what's that? After the waves passed, a figure could be seen floating on the surface of the foamy seawater, slowly drifting over. Wolfgang's sharp eyes saw that it was a woman. Without saying anything, he drifted down and scooped her up. Oh, what a beautiful Oriental lady! Wolfgang immediately exclaimed. Charlotte rolled her eyes, but looked around. I found one here. Then the other one is you? I didn't find you. What are you going to do? Seeing that Wolfgang didn't intend to let go, Charlotte couldn't help but ask. As a gentleman, of course, I have to lend a helping hand to a beautiful lady in trouble. Wolfgang smiled. This must be the beginning of a beautiful, exotic love. Ah, my inspiration is starting to burst out again. Don't forget why we came out. Don't complicate matters. Miss Charlotte, don't you think this powerful Oriental lady may know the news of His Highness Lucifer? Although she knew this was basically Wolfgang's excuse, Charlotte couldn't be sure. She could only keep silent and let this guy carry the woman back to the cruise ship. Under the sea, the body wrapped in white clothes slowly sank. She had lost consciousness, but even so, she didn't loosen her grip on the long sword. She didn't know where she was going to sink. Suddenly, a black shadow swam towards her. The black shadow circled around her for short, while before dragging her deeper into the sea. It took more than 8 hours from the Eastern 8 district to the 0 time zone before the plane slowly landed at the airport of the capital of Great Britain. The journey was quite comfortable. The reason for the comfort was that the club master and servant, who originally only ordered a relatively good business class, were informed after boarding that it had been upgraded to a first-class VIP cabin. This probably wasn't Song Ying's idea. If it was Miss Zhang who was kind to people without leaving a trace, it was probably Miss Zhang. Master, are you going to tour along the way? This was the first time Luochio came to this country. The weather in Fog City wasn't as gray as people said. Instead, it was very sunny, but it might be because they were lucky that they didn't encounter gray weather. Okay, Luochio smiled. After leaving Hua country, he naturally had more freedom. He felt that he could wander around freely. As for the enrollment, Luocio really didn't care. The so-called study abroad was just a reason to leave. Of course, the admission of that university was true, but the one who was admitted was Yu Yi, who just impersonated Boss Luo. As the university with the highest threshold in Great Britain, Luocio didn't think that he could pass the exam with his level. At that time, I think we need to find a hotel where we can stay temporarily. Luocio suggested, have you lived here before? The previous owner opened a shop here about 3 months ago, right? The servant girl recalled, but it was 200 years ago. I remember the sky here wasn't so clear at that time. At this time, dozens of nameplates suddenly appeared at the entrance of the inquiry station. The nameplates were held up high, and the words Luocio were written in big Chinese characters. It wasn't a matter of whether they could pay attention to it. They could definitely see it. Basically, it wasn't something important. Boss Luo, who didn't use the omniscient skill, was quite curious at this time. He walked side by side with the servant girl to one of the nameplates. He had yellow skin and black eyes, so he should be at least Asian. You must be Master Chiao. The Asian introduced himself first. Hello, I'm Peter Chun, the manager of the business department of the Song Dynasty Group's London branch. Song Dynasty. Luocio was stunned. At this time, he didn't need to use the omniscient skill to guess what had happened. Yes, Peter Chan took out a gold-stamped business card. Master Chiao, it's like this. After you left, Missing has told us to treat you well. We have prepared the best room for you in the hotel. Please come with me. I don't need to look for a place to stay. Luocio looked at Yu Yi and smiled slightly. The servant girl said softly, Missing is very considerate to you. Not only did she send you off, but she also arranged a place for you here. Boss Luo made a gesture of invitation. Ladies first. I'll carry the luggage. Peter Chan hurriedly walked up at this time. The car is ready. It's just outside. Luocio looked at those people who were still holding nameplates. These people, Peter Chan said, they are all from the company. Basically, some people from each department were transferred here. We were afraid that you didn't notice them, so we called more people. Those who didn't know would think that some big shot was coming. The surrounding tourists and the people who came to receive them looked at them curiously. Boss Luo's presence suddenly became so low that only the Song Dynasty employees could notice him. He looked at Peter Chan and said politely, Mr. Chun, please lead the way. Also, please thank these employees for me. It's our pleasure, Peter Chan hurriedly said. Song Dynasty Group mainly operated star-rated hotels. The car that came to pick them up this time was naturally the local hotel's best delivery car. Mr. Chun, are you Chinese? In a separated back seat, Luocio and Peter Chan started chatting. My father is Chinese, my mother is Indian. The time for chatting passed quietly. Before they knew it, they had arrived at Song Dynasty Hotel in Kensington, where the fog was growing inch by inch. Peter Chan personally sent Luocio and Peter Chan to the door of the presidential suite on the upper floor of the hotel. He was as respectful as a gatekeeper. This was the manager of the hotel's operations department. Master Chiao, this is the hotel's room with the best view. At night, you can have a panoramic view of the fog city. Luocio was quite satisfied. Miss Maid smiled and said, Mr. Chun, sorry to trouble you. I'll take care of the rest. Peter Chan hurriedly said politely. Then he suddenly said, Miss, we've also arranged your room. My room? Miss Maid was a little confused. Peter Chan glanced at Luocio and forced a smile. Yes, miss, your room is on the 4th floor. But don't worry, it's also a very good room. We'll give you the best service. This is the 17th floor. Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. It's really arranged. NPS 327th? Chapter 1277. What? She didn't check in. It was a satellite video communication. On the screen, Peter Chan was sweating profusely and didn't dare to look straight at her. He was in his 30s, so he naturally wouldn't be afraid of a girl in her early 20s. However, the person in front of him was a witch who dared to directly fire the president of a branch company in Fog City. He really couldn't help but be careful. Missing, to be exact, the lady you mentioned didn't go to the room we arranged, but stayed in Master Chiao's suite. What? You let her go to the hotel? Didn't I say there was a traffic jam first? Peter Chan wiped his sweat with a handkerchief. Miss, That lady got in the car with Master Chio. We couldn't block it. Incompetent. I'm sorry. Peter Chan was even more panicked. He was afraid that his position as the manager of the operation department would come to an end. Unexpectedly, Miss Ng on the other side of the earth sighed and waved her hand. Forget it. You've worked hard today. Take half a day off next week as compensation for today. Peter Chan was dumbfounded. He didn't expect to have half a day off after messing up. He was overjoyed on the spot. Thank you, Miss Ng. Humph. I was going to give you a week's paid leave if this matter could be done well. Now it's gone, and you won't have this opportunity in the future. Thank you, Miss Ng. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, his expression was more bitter. As soon as the video communication ended, Miss Ng on the other side of the earth suddenly leaned back. The chair was pressed so hard that it seemed to be about to break. She muttered, I didn't know it's really the Song family's genes. Whether it was her uncle Song Howren, who was like a B*TCH, or her grandfather whom she respected and loved, they had never been afraid of women's charms. She grew up in a family that relied entirely on illegal activities, so it was common for her to see such things. But except for her grandmother who had passed away, her grandfather had never intended to make the women around him his wife. As for Song Howren, he had no intention of getting married either. Why am I thinking about this? It was a rare Qingtian afternoon in Fog City. In front of an old 5-story building on the banks of the River Thames, a beetle with a high quality of life slowly stopped. After that, 2 elegant men in suits and leather shoes got out of the car. One of them was slightly older, about 35 years old, and was very capable. The other one was obviously much younger. He looked like a young man in his early 20s. He had blonde hair, looked young and energetic, and held a long object wrapped in brown cloth in his hand. At the top of the stairs, there was already a black man in a black windbreaker with an eye patch over his left eye waiting in front of the door of the small building. The older gentleman smiled and greeted the one-eyed black man. Nick, you should change the color of your mask. The one-eyed black man. Nick was obviously someone who did not like to smile. At this moment, his remaining eye was looking straight ahead as he said indifferently, Gareth, the master and mistress of this house, are currently out. You have at most half an hour to exorcise the evil spirit from the woman of this house. Only half an hour? The energetic young man, next to the middle-aged gentleman, was stunned. The black man, Nick, said slowly, because I need at least 15 minutes to deal with the aftermath. In addition, I can't guarantee whether the master and mistress of this house will come back early. Okay. Gareth patted Nick's shoulder gently. Relax, friend. I'll finish before the time comes. Are you really not going to consider changing a new eye patch? I always feel that you're like the one in the movies. Nick directly opened the door behind him. Gareth shrugged and smiled as he walked into the house with the young man, who followed him. Nick only closed the door after the two entered. The Knights of the Round Table was one of the oldest organizations in the land of Britain. Since its establishment, it had been guarding the peace of this land from the war of the past to the exorcism of the present. To this day, it had even faded from the sight of humans. Only a very small number of people knew that this mechanism still existed and was still operating. Gareth of the 12 Knights actually brought a newcomer out for a mission this time. It seems that it's time for the trial for the vacant seat again. Nick leaned against the door and thought to himself. Every 5 years, there would be a group of outstanding young people coming from all over the country to obtain the inheritance of one of the 12 Knights, the name of Ector, that had been left vacant until now. Klein, do you know the reason for the birth of evil spirits? On the wooden corridor, the man who had given up his original name and now inherited the name of Gareth suddenly turned around and asked. The young man named Klein quickly said, all hatred, jealousy, and evil thoughts will remain in the form of evil thoughts if they can't find peace after the death of a person. They will grow by constantly devouring other evil thoughts and eventually become evil spirits. In addition, if evil spirits are left alone, they will continue to devour human lives and eventually become terrible evil spirits. Well said. You memorized well. Gareth smiled slightly. But there are some things that aren't taught in the books. What are they? The young Klein quickly asked. Gareth looked at the end of the corridor and said casually, "If humans are willing to degrade themselves, they can also become evil spirits." I got it. Gareth stopped at the handrail at the end of the corridor and looked at the pillar of the handrail. "Did you bring the magic revealing powder, Klein?" "Yes." Klein quickly took out a box the size of a mirror box and opened it very carefully. Then he sprinkled some green powder on the pillar. A blood-red circle that looked as if it was still dripping with blood and was evil, with a pentagram as the foundation, slowly emerged. Klein was quite surprised. "Mr. Gareth, this is a magic circle?" "To be exact, it's a type of witchcraft ritual and a structure that is commonly used by a branch of the Sea of Love witches." Gareth spoke very carefully as if he was teaching. "This branch of witches is better at using drugs and mental witchcraft. In addition, it's also one of the few types of witches that doesn't prohibit contact with humans. Could it be that the woman of the master of this house is a branch of the Sea of Love witches?" Gareth said, "Not necessarily. It's also possible that she accidentally got a handwritten copy of their witchcraft that was left outside. Due to mistakes and improper learning, she embarked on the path of evil. The witchcraft of this branch of witches should basically be in the healing aspect, unlike this one, which is full of evil energy." "Oh, Mr. Gareth, you're really knowledgeable," Klein said respectfully. He was Gareth's knight servant. Even for such a position, he had to go through many tests before he could win it. Obviously, he cherished this opportunity very much and was fortunate enough to be recommended by Gareth to participate in the inheritance trial of Echtersund. Gareth shook his head and smiled. "I'm not knowledgeable. It's just that I've suffered enough in the past. About the Sea of Love witches, it was one of my seniors who told me. To be able to become Mr. Gareth Sr., he must be a righteous, kind, and powerful great knight." Klein was fascinated. "He's powerful. He's really powerful. Perhaps he's also kind, but he's not necessarily righteous." Gareth shook his head. "This senior has been stripped of his title as a knight 20 years ago. How could that be?" Klein was suddenly shocked, even more shocked than when he discovered the witchcraft on the pillar. To be stripped of his title as a knight by a mechanism. What kind of crime did he commit? "If you also have a daughter who's in love with a vampire." Gareth sighed slowly. He seemed to want to say something, but his eyes suddenly became sharp as an eagle's. Klein noticed Gareth's change in an instant, but he didn't have time to react. He only saw Gareth's arm waving at an incredible speed, a speed that exceeded the limits of the human body. Something had been cut apart by Gareth's swing and landed on the floor. It was something that resembled mud, something that resembled a viscous creature. After it had been cut apart and landed on the floor, it immediately lost its vitality and turned into a pile of black powder. "Klein." Gareth suddenly stepped aside and said coldly, "I'll leave this task to you. I haven't checked your progress in today's swordsmanship lesson." Klein knew that this was Mr. Gareth's test for him. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded resolutely. He untied the brown cloth on the long object in his hand. It was a one-handed cross longsword. Klein took a deep breath and walked along the corridor at the end of the corridor. He had actually experienced a few actual battles, but he was always assisting on the side. This was the first time he was dealing with it alone. Of course, such an actual battle would come sooner or later. He just didn't expect it to be so soon. "I must not disappoint Mr. Gareth." Klein was firm in his belief. "Klein, come on. Klein, you're great. Klein, come on." Behind him, the elegant knight Gareth suddenly put on a fake nose that he pulled out from somewhere. He put his hands on his hips and lifted his legs to dance. "Mr. Gareth, you're one of the 12 knights of the Round Table, the great Gareth. Please stop your indecent behavior. You're disturbing me. It's rare for me to find a new type of fake nose." Gareth sighed in disappointment. Then he said very softly, "Klein, come on. Klein, come on." Klein sighed heavily. There was no doubt that he respected this knight from the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for his true personality that would go off the rails from time to time, perhaps he would be even more perfect. Tidying up his mood, the young trainee knight once again approached the room at the end of the corridor. He only felt a cold chill that began to invade his body little by little. However, the strong physique that he had trained for many years was still able to resist this chill. Finally, the door of the room at the end of the corridor slammed open. An even colder airflow blew out from the room. It was actually a strong wind. At the same time, a burst of terrifying and sharp laughter sounded at this time. Klein moved against the wind. He infused the sword energy that he had trained through the ancient method into the steel sword in his hand. This slender cross sword suddenly emitted a weak green light and broke through the strong wind. Klein shouted loudly. He raised the cross sword in his hand and suddenly rushed into the room. Only the sound of smashing could be heard from the room. After a moment, a figure rolled out of the room. Klein's left eye had become red and swollen. He quickly stood up, raised the cross again, shouted, and rushed in again. Roll out, stand up, raise the sword, rush in again. Roll out, stand up, raise the sword. Not knowing when it started, Gareth had an extra cup of coffee in his hand. Right, he also found an old-fashioned black record player in the corridor. Oh, the taste of the owner of this house is really good. I like it. He took out the black record and put it into the record player. Then he moved the needle. It was a dance song, Blue Danube. Yeah. The diligent and unyielding battle cry and the notes of the dance song were wonderfully intertwined in the corridor. Gareth sat down and began to flip through today's newspaper. Oh, brave Klein, please be sure to persevere until I finish reading this article. I will work hard. Good boy, Intao. Miss May didn't eat the afternoon tea sent by the hotel. Instead, she prepared a light fruit plate for her master. Yes, this hotel is not bad. There's an indoor organic farm downstairs. I went to pick some and brought them back, Yi said softly. The stems of the cherries were all pulled out like sparkling rubies. The suite on the upper floor of this hotel could be said to have everything. On the outside terrace, it was equipped with a large open-air swimming pool. Boss Luo was sitting on a beach chair on the terrace, reading an English book leisurely. He took a yin tao from the plate and put it into his mouth to taste. Suddenly, he curiously said, Right, when I just came up, I didn't seem to see the 13th floor. Is it like this? In the West, the number 13 is a taboo. Miss Maid sat next to him and said softly, Many of the older buildings will remove the 13th floor, but it is very rare in modern times. Boss Luo looked at the River Thames outside and smiled. The missing 13th floor, I don't know if something interesting will happen. If the master wants it, it will naturally be there. Miss Maid told him the truth. Luochio was startled, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. I still want to be quiet for 2 more days. As he said, he picked up a yin tao and sent it to the maid's mouth to feed her. Miss Maid lifted her hair, lowered her head, and gently opened her lips, then slowly bit it. Is it delicious? Yes. Chapter 1278. Omega, 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 omega. Chicksum, etchy, he choked up and said, A novel? Nick took out his pocket watch and looked at the time. Then, he opened the door and walked up the stairs. When he walked up, Gareth was folding newspapers. He frowned and looked at the end of the corridor. Klein dragged his body and slowly walked out of the room. He was limping, and his arm that wasn't holding the sword was hanging down. His clothes were torn in many places, and his face was covered in dust. Of course, there was also blood mixed in. Reporting to Mr. Gareth, the target has been successfully suppressed. You were right. She is indeed an illegal witch. Witch? Nick frowned and stared at Gareth. Why is she a witch? Gareth shrugged and said with a faint smile, My friend, it is obvious that there is something wrong with your intelligence work this time. Nick did not argue about the intelligence issue. Instead, he said with slight anger, Knight Gareth, since she is a witch, you should not let Klein act alone. Every apprentice knight is a valuable asset of the organization. As one of the 12 knights, you have an even greater obligation to protect the safety of these young knights. Gareth lowered his head, as if he was ashamed of Nick's reprimand and could not raise his head. Klein saw this, and although he was weak, he hurriedly said, Mr. Nick, please do not blame Mr. Gareth. This is my request. It is my fault. Klein, Nick said indifferently. Honesty should be the virtue that a knight should have. Okay, I apologize. Gareth raised his head abruptly. I'm sorry. She didn't know when he had put on that weird, fake nose again. Gareth. Nick's voice became much louder. Gareth plastered himself to the wall in fear. He did not have the slightest gentlemanly demeanor. He smiled apologetically and said, "Hey, buddy, relax. Haven't you heard the story of a lion pushing a cub off a cliff?" Plop! All of a sudden, Klein fell to the ground, face down, his body falling forward. He had already lost consciousness. When Klein woke up, he was already lying in the medical room of the round table mechanism. There was still a needle inserted into the back of his hand. Gareth, on the other hand, was sitting at the side, reading a small hardcover book and wiping his tears from time to time. "Mr. Gareth, you're a man with a lot of feelings." Klein propped himself up forcefully. "You're awake." Gareth did not seem to care that his emotions were being seen. He simply closed the book. "How do you feel?" "It's as if my bones were disassembled and then pieced back together. The person who treated me must be an expert who likes to play with Legos." Klein smiled bitterly. Gareth said, "Child, I like your humor. How long have I been unconscious?" Klein raised his head and asked. 5 hours. Gareth said, 3 of your ribs are broken, your left arm is moderately fractured, and there's a lot of internal bleeding in your spleen. You also lost a decayed tooth. Congratulations, Klein. You have successfully survived a crusade against the evil witches and completed your mission very well. I don't think I've done well enough." Klein did not have the slightest bit of pride. Instead, he began to discuss with the experienced knight about the battle before he passed out. "I shouldn't have hesitated. That way my arm might not have been fractured." "Mr. Gareth? Oh, I'm sorry, where did you go?" Gareth yawned at this time. He was actually dozing off. This was probably the combination of a seemingly gentlemanly but lazy superior and a subordinate who was extremely serious in everything he did. "By the way, Mr. Gareth, what happened to the witch?" Gareth said, "Nick has already taken her into custody. She will be interrogated next. If she has a murder case, she will be punished." "Isn't she the daughter of that family?" "My previous deduction should be correct," Gareth said casually. "She accidentally obtained a handwritten copy of witchcraft. She didn't learn it properly and went astray. She should not have a direct relationship with the witches of the Sea of Love. As for the male and female owners of that house, someone will follow up and deal with them." Klein nodded, then looked around in confusion. The infirmary was very large. There were a total of 10 beds, but he was the only one using one at this time. Of course, the utilization rate here was generally not very high. After all, it was the capital of Britain. The power of the Knights of the Round Table was very strong here, so the chances of the knights being injured in missions were relatively small. "It seems very quiet outside. Are they all on missions?" Klein was thoughtful. His hearing was very good. It was a natural talent. "Yes, I heard that a few orcs went missing." Gareth suddenly took out a pen from his chest, then took out a label and lowered his head to write something. "Orcs?" Klein opened his mouth in surprise. Gareth said, "A group of illegally captured orcs passed by the docks here by water. Our people received the news and went to rescue them. In the process of the mission, a few orcs went missing. Considering the emotions of these orcs at that time, they may cause a lot of damage. So our Mr. Hopkins ordered that all those who don't have a mission at hand should be dispatched to search for the orcs." Mr. Hopkins was not a knight, but he was the person in charge of the Knights of Fog. Illegally captured. Klein lowered his head and frowned slightly. "The orc trafficking has always existed," Gareth said calmly. Gareth said indifferently, "Especially some fanatical fellows in the Magician Association. They especially like to use orcs for their research. We can't let these lost orcs out there. It's too dangerous." Klein was about to get out of bed as he said this, but Gareth stuffed a note into Klein's hand. "Well, this is for you." "What is this?" "Of course, it's your permission slip." Gareth smiled and said, "Knight Klein, for the sake of the next knight inheritance, I ask you not to continue to work as a trainee knight until you recover from your injuries. Of course, you can still come to the organization. After all, the nurses here are so charming, right?" After that, ignoring Klein's refutation, Gareth patted him on the shoulder. "Have a good rest." The knight pulled open the curtain beside the bed and left in a carefree manner. Then, a nurse came in with medicine and pills in her hand. It was an old, dark-skinned Annie with red lips. "Mr. Gareth, you lied." "Oh, young man, You are so pitiful. I will take good care of you. Come, let me take off your clothes and apply the medicine, sweetheart. I, I will do it myself. Madam, please don't touch that place. It was still sunny in the morning, but in the afternoon, it started to drizzle on the streets of Fog City. People were wearing windbreakers and holding all kinds of umbrellas as they shuttled through the streets. A man with a black umbrella, a khaki windbreaker, and a hat stopped in front of a red building. He took a detour to the back alley and went down the side stairs. It was an underground bar. The door and the walls on both sides were painted with all kinds of graffiti. It was unknown if it was because the bar was not open yet, but other than the bartender who was wiping glasses, there were no other customers in the deserted bar. Strongbow. The man sat down and looked at the bartender as he ordered a drink. The bartender was a little old. He had a white beard and looked to be around 50 years old, but his manners were very elegant. Strongbow. The bartender slowly put down the drink requested by the customer, then turned around and continued his work. The customer sipped the wine for a while and then suddenly said, "Do you know, compared to sunny weather, I prefer rainy weather." When the bartender heard this, he looked back and ignored him. He said to himself, "Wherever the sunlight reaches, the shadows will be expelled. They will be compressed little by little, just like homeless people. But real homeless people can still curl up in corners or subway stations. But the shadows will continue to be compressed. Only on a cloudy day, they will have the opportunity to be unscrupulous. The sunlight will cry because of your words." The bartender suddenly said. He said, "Then let the sunlight not appear." The bartender frowned and directly turned around, but the customer in front of him had disappeared. There was only a spinning coin on the table. At the same time, on the table next to the cup, there were wet words written with wine. Serpent snake. The coin slowly stopped spinning. The girl looked very thin and weak, as if she had been malnourished for a long time. At the same time, she wore a very thin dress that had long been dirty. At the same time, there were many cracks in it. In the alley, the girl was hiding from the rain. The rain had just stopped. She was curled up under the eaves of someone's back door. She was holding a box of Chinese fried noodles that had obviously been eaten, but hadn't been thrown away because it had been eaten. Although it was called Chinese fried noodles, most entrepreneurs had already improved the recipe to cater to the local taste. Maybe the real Chinese were not used to it. However, the girl at this time seemed to be really hungry from the way she was wolfing down the food. She seemed to be afraid of something and looked around nervously from time to time. Her helplessness was not hidden at all, and the cold brought by the rain and the cloudy day. "Hey, look what I found." 3 young men dressed as punks surrounded the girl in front of the back door. What a poor little wildcat. Their faces had a look that could make the girl panic. One of them directly took out a few bills and was about to speak. In the end, Klein still took out the round table mechanism's medical room and rode on his beloved car, Harley Davidson. In the case of a moderate fracture of his left arm, he could only put a plaster on his hand and wrapped it around his neck with a bandage. He slowly drove on the road with the injury. He didn't live in the dormitory of the round table mechanism, but rented a small house by the river. The apprentice knight's job was very dangerous but relatively low. The apprentice knight's salary and treatment were also very good. The motorcycle abruptly came to a stop. The scene of the girl being bullied by several hooligans entered Klein's peripheral vision in an instant. Without any consideration, he steered the motorcycle, swerved, and barged into the alley. The strong headlights directly pierced the eyes of these young men dressed as punks, making their eyes hurt. One of the young men's hand was still holding the ragged girl's arm at this time, as if he was pulling it. "Hey, friend, bullying a lady is not a gentleman's behavior." Klein lifted the blindfold on the windshield and at the same time pulled out the key on the motorcycle and walked down. The young man who was pulling the girl's arm frowned, but still let go of the girl's arm. But the other young man at the side at this time suddenly sneered at this time. "Like you, suddenly disturbing others, it doesn't seem to be a gentleman's behavior, right? You better take care of yourself first. Just came out of the hospital?" Klein frowned and then said indifferently, "Please don't trouble this lady again, okay? We didn't trouble her." The leading young man shook his head. "Believe me, this is not a hero saving a damsel in distress." We just feel that she is pitiful and want to help her." But Klein seemed to have made up his mind. He took off his helmet and hung it on the handle of the motorcycle, saying indifferently, "The sixth rule of the knight's regulations: never force a lady. The fifth rule of the knight's regulations: always give aid to a lady. Get out." The three young men frowned and looked at each other. Then the leading young man said directly, "And then hand her over to you? Sorry, you are not an unknown person. Gentlemen, I don't want you to regret, really." Klein sighed and slowly walked forward. Although he was injured, it was more than enough to deal with these young men. He was thinking about how to deal with this matter properly. Maybe it was a good choice to scare them away. After all, they didn't do any substantial harm to this lady, and the police couldn't convict them. He even hoped that this matter could be solved with violence. But at this time, the leading young man reached into his pocket, as if he was going to take out something. Klein was startled, thinking that the other party was going to take out some kind of weapon, so he planned to take the initiative. He rushed forward, but just when he rushed to the front of the young man, he was stunned and abruptly stopped. Social worker certificate?" The young man sighed and said, "Yes, this is my work certificate. I just saw that this lady was in trouble, so I plan to take her back to the social workers center first. Did you misunderstand something? If you still don't believe me, you can call and ask. In addition, this is my ID card." But you?" Klein looked at the three of them strangely. Earrings, punk, dyed hair, and black lips. Damn, are they social workers of the social workers center? Is it strange? We just have this hobby, and we just came back from performing. The young man shrugged his shoulders. This is awkward. Very sorry. Baidu, search Baidu, Chinese network. No advertising message. Chapter 1279. Making mistakes is not terrible. What is terrible is finding excuses for yourself to escape after making a mistake. Klein's Knight's Code. Klein followed the three young men back to the social work center. Because he was still a little worried, Klein followed the three young men all the way to the social work center. Only then did he dispel the last doubts in his heart. After confirming the identities of the three people, Klein suddenly remembered that there was a saying in the distant East. "I smoke, get tattoos, drink, fight, and have abortions, but I am a good woman." When the three of them took off their makeup and put on their normal clothes, they indeed looked like two different people. Will, who was wearing glasses, even had a scholarly air to him. This made Klein apologize for a long time. "Haha. Actually, we were also shocked at that time. You suddenly rushed in with injuries all over your body. We were really afraid that there would be a conflict and you would be injured again." The young man was Caldwell. He had been working in the social work center for 3 years. He was also a rock and roll enthusiast. He formed a band with two friends and often participated in some charity activities. You didn't expect it, right? If Mr. Gareth was here, he would definitely use a teasing tone to talk to me, right? Klein knew that he was in the wrong from the beginning, so his attitude became more and more proper. What happened next was not his business. Although the girl did not speak along the way and showed fear and other emotions, she was after all brought to the social work center. She would receive good help here, so Klein did not need to worry about anything. He intended to say goodbye to Will and the others. Just as they were about to leave, a female social worker from the social worker center suddenly walked back with quick steps. There was a look of dissatisfaction on her face. This female social worker was the one who had been ordered by Will to wash and change the girl's clothes. After all, they were all men. "Will, I doubt your judgment ability." The ordinary-looking female social worker said expressionlessly, "This child is obviously a boy. You actually asked me to wash him?" "Oh, a boy. What a boy." Inside the room, the boy had already changed into a set of clothes. The clothes were donated by someone else. His long brown hair was simply tied up with a rubber band. Soft facial lines, emerald eyes, slender figure, already white skin, and that inconspicuous but definitely present Adam's apple. Of course, other sexual characteristics had also been vaguely confirmed. This delicate guy who exuded a delicate beauty from inside out was indeed a man. Will and Klein were amazed, but the other two members of the band with Will covered their eyes in heartache. What are you going to do with him?" Klein calmed himself down and changed the word she to him. He hasn't said anything. Will calmed himself down and said, "Just now I also mentioned that there are quite a number of bruises on his body, especially on his back. We suspect that he may have been severely abused. Due to the shock, he may have been traumatized. At the same time, we did not find anything like identification on him. I think they'll contact the police and figure out his identity first. Don't worry, he will be well taken care of here. We have a good psychological counselor, but he is on leave today." He could see that Klein was also a warm-hearted person. Although riding a Harley on the street with bandages all over his body was indeed easy to be misunderstood. "Sorry to trouble you." Klein nodded and took out a business card. "This is my contact information. If there's anything I can help you with, please don't hesitate. If the police need to take a statement, you can contact me directly." "Shoe store?" Klein glanced at the name printed on the business card. Klein smiled and said, "It's just an ancestral craft." He soon officially said goodbye to Will and the other two, then rode his motorcycle and left the community center. He went back to his own place, which was also where his shoe store was located. Before becoming a trainee knight, Klein was a qualified shoemaker. His father was also a shoemaker. At the same time, his father was also a knight, but until he passed away, he did not get the title of the 12 Knights. He only became a Grand Knight in the Round Table mechanism. When going out, Luaccio declined a car arranged by Peter Chan and chose a double-decker bus. Sightseeing, taking photos, eating delicious food, young people performing on the street, and artists. Just like the most ordinary travelers. During dinner, Luaccio did not go to find a restaurant. Instead, he planned to take advantage of this time to see the famous scenic spots. After all, it was rare to come here, even if he was just passing by. Basically, after 5:30 p.m., the major scenic spots in Fog City were closed to the public, and because of the sudden rain, these scenic spots were particularly deserted. Desertion had its advantages. At least, it felt like the whole place was booked. Of course, there were still some places that were open at night. "Let's go to that." Across the riverbank, Luaccio pointed to the huge rotating eye across the riverbank. The huge Ferris we'll call the Eye of Fog City. Miss Maid of course agreed, but she didn't know if she could get a seat with only her master. If there was another pair of couples next to them, it would spoil the atmosphere. On the street, a man in a yellow windbreaker was strolling. The collar had been raised, covering a small part of his face, and the lowered brim of his hat also blocked his eyes. He walked alone. Men and women of all shapes and sizes walked past him on the street. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a dresser and looked at himself in the glass. He began to tidy up his appearance. Suddenly, in the moment when the passers-by didn't pay attention to him, the man in the yellow windbreaker suddenly took a step. This step went directly into the glass of the window. In other words, he seemed to directly go through the window and disappeared in an instant. Almost at the same time, at the place where the man in the yellow windbreaker disappeared, 3 men suddenly walked quickly from different places on the street. They finally met at the place where the man in the windbreaker disappeared. One of them was flustered and exasperated. "It's time travel. We've been discovered." Another man quickly took out his communicator. "This is the Raptor Group. We've lost the target." In another alley across the street from the dresser's shop, a whirlpool suddenly appeared, and then a figure emerged from the whirlpool. The man in the yellow windbreaker reached out to hold the hat he was wearing, with a smile at the corner of his mouth, and then continued to walk forward. However, in front of him, there was a bouncing red ball that blocked the windbreaker-wearing man's path. The fist-sized red ball was currently bouncing up and down. Suddenly, the red ball jumped up even higher than before. It jumped all the way to the railing of a back staircase at a height of 3 meters and jumped into the hands of Clown. He was called a clown only because his makeup was like a clown, not because of his clothes. In fact, the clown was wearing a black suit. The makeup on the clown's left eye melted like a drop of tear, hanging on his pink and white face. And the wide red lips obviously didn't have a smile. The man in the yellow windbreaker looked up, then took off his hat, and smiled politely. "It's my honor to have your Excellency Dagonet block my way." The clown in the corridor. The knight with the name Dagonet gently jumped down. The raised lip makeup was not only crying but also smiling. He slowly said in a very pleasant voice, "As a senior cadre of Doomsday Myth, It's my honor to be able to arrest you personally. Mr. Reed, I wonder if you're interested in going back with me? The man in the yellow windbreaker. Reed sneered, I'm just a tourist. It's not kind of you Knights of the Round Table to treat a tourist like this. I heard that a few orcs went missing today. That's not a good thing. What if these orcs suddenly go crazy in the busy city? The clown sneered. You're the one who gave us the information that a group of illegally arrested orcs will pass by the Fog City dock. I'm curious. Why did you give me such information? Now, most of my colleagues are busy looking for these orcs on the streets, but you, Mr. Reed, are wandering around the streets of Fog City. I'm really interested in your intentions. I don't think I have the right to say no. It was a question like a test, but this Mr. Reed didn't seem to be afraid. Mr. Clown played with the red ball in his hand and gently threw it to the ground. The red ball bounced on the ground and then returned to his hand. This seemed to be a signal to attack. The moment the red ball was in his hand, it directly shot out from the clown's palm. The target was naturally Mr. Reed, but he was already prepared. The moment the red ball was shot, the hat in his hand suddenly turned. The red ball was shot directly into the hat. The hat continued to turn. When turned back again, the red ball was shot out again, this time towards the clown like a magician's prop. It was a simple fight, but both sides didn't gain any advantage. Mr. Knight, I don't think you want to have a fight with me on the streets of Fog City, right? The senior officer of Doomsday Myth said calmly. After all, you're not a criminal like me. We don't have so many scruples. Just right. Mr. Clown shrugged and said, I'm also planning to accept punishment and get a good suspension leave. I've been working too much recently. Reed narrowed his eyes. He didn't know if it was because of his good luck that he met this clown. Obviously, the clown, Dagonet, was not the strongest knight of the Round Table, but he must be the most unruly guy. To some extent, he could even be described as a lunatic. He had more important things to do today, so he didn't intend to delay time with this lunatic here. Okay. Reed suddenly raised his hands. I'll go back with you. Hearing this, Mr. Clown didn't seem to let down his guard. In the next moment, Reed's figure disappeared from the spot, just like how he disappeared in front of the window of the clothing store. Mr. Clown was not surprised. The moment Ren escaped, he bent his legs slightly and rushed forward. Yes, that powerful jumping force made his body look like an arrow that was shot out toward a certain direction. Somewhere on the roof of a building on the street, after a series of distortions, Reed slowly landed. But at this moment, Mr. Clown arrived almost at the same time. Reed's expression slightly changed. His teleportation skill was limited, so he couldn't teleport long distances. What a terrifying physique. What a pleasant game of cat and mouse. Reed used his teleportation skill again. His body disappeared and reappeared in the night sky again and again, constantly moving over the streets of Fog City, as if he had obtained the ability to fly. But Mr. Clown behind him was always able to catch up with him again and again with his terrifying perception and strong physique. Just like what Mr. Clown said, this was really just a game of cat and mouse. Finally, after another round of catching, Reed suddenly stopped, and this time he didn't use his teleportation skill. Are you tired of this game? Mr. Clown stopped as well. The two of them confronted each other on top of a huge support frame. The colorful lights in the surroundings shone on them at this moment. Mr. Clown, is the scenery here good? Reed smiled and looked down. Below them, there were many men and women, and all kinds of people were waiting. The place where Reed and Clown were confronting each other was on the support frame of the world-famous supergiant Ferris wheel, the Eye of Fog City. Mr. Clown also glanced at it. Unexpectedly, Reed pressed his hands on the support frame of the Ferris wheel. With a touch of madness, the shadow snake is about to reappear, and this is the beginning, starting from death. At this moment, a powerful magical power was channeled into the support frame of the Ferris wheel. The axis of the Ferris wheel was deformed because it couldn't bear the pressure of the magical power. The Eye of Fog City, that was slowly rotating, might fall off the support frame in the next second, and then crash down on the numerous tourists. At this moment, Mr. Clown didn't have any hesitation. He, who was always eccentric, obviously didn't want to see so many people die under the collapse of the Eye of Fog City. He had to give up the good opportunity to attack Reed and jump to the axis of the support frame, intending to use his physical strength to pull the Eye of Fog City and the support frame off. But the sudden break of the support frame had already caused the Eye of Fog City to shake. Those tourists who had already sat in the seats and were enjoying the night view of Fog City became frightened because of this. "Can I catch up?" Mr. Clown's face became extremely solemn. "You can't catch up." Reed's voice came from above. "It was so crazy. The shadow snake is about to reappear, and this is the beginning, starting from death." He once again said those words like a declaration. Mr. Clown, one of the 12 Knights, was full after all. Just 1 point, and the Eye of Fog City completely fell off from the axis of the support frame. A sickly smile appeared on Reed's face. Below the Eye of the Fog City, the music that was played for the tourists was now so beautiful, as if it was the concerto of death. What a beautiful sound! As if he had already seen a lot of deaths, and the annoyed and angry expression on Mr. Clown's face. He opened his hands, closed his eyes, and wanted to embrace this beautiful moment. Music! The music was still pleasant to listen to, and there was also a pleasant atmosphere. The colorful lights of the Eye of Fog City once again swept over Mr. Reed's body. After a few seconds, Mr. Reed opened his eyes in astonishment. The expected collapse of the Eye of Fog City didn't happen. The cold wind blew, and Mr. Reed stared at the Eye of Fog City that continued to rotate slowly, with his mouth wide open. Not only him, Mr. Clown, who was standing on the bearing, was also the same at this moment. Because of the close distance, he clearly saw what happened just now. The bearing that had fallen off magically returned to its original position in front of his eyes. Not only that, the steel nails and screws that were broken by the magic power even flew back from all directions and fixed the bearing again. The Ferris wheel slowly rotated. A bloody crisis disappeared just like that. At this moment, a black flame abruptly rose from the bottom of the bearing with a speed as fast as lightning. The black flame traveled along the core of the bearing and instantly reached Mr. Reed's body. Bang! Mr. Reed didn't have time to scream as his whole body was wrapped by the black flame, and then he fell from above. Mr. Clown was once again surprised by this unexpected turn of events. He even took a picture of Mr. Reed's face as he fell. In one of the seats of the Eye of Fog City, a boss looked out with a strange expression. He really intended to come here for sightseeing, and it was already the last stop of today's sightseeing. Obviously, the transaction had been closed, but he was still a troublemaker. The atmosphere is obviously very good. The black flame flickered on Miss Maid's fingertips. Miss Maid, who gradually began to lose her indifference, seemed to be angry at this moment. Yin 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 PS1. The icing on the cake is the book I'm Really Immortal. The author, Summerflower. I don't need to say more. PS2. The additional chapter will be delayed. Chapter 1280. The black flames burning on Ren's body dissipated with the wind before he was about to fall to the ground. Mr. Clown suddenly jumped down before Ren's body completely fell and was crushed into a meat patty. With a few leaps, he landed outside the crowd, in a corner of the square where the Eye of Fog City was located, avoiding the crowd. The Ferris wheel was still rotating slowly, but Mr. Clown stared at the many cabins and frowned. At the same time, he also checked Ren's situation. At this time, Ren could be described as terrible. He had completely lost consciousness, his clothes were completely burned, and his skin was mostly charred black. His eyes were even white. Mr. Dagonite. At this time, 3 Grand Knights of the Round Table mechanism squeezed out of the crowd, found Mr. Clown's position, and rushed over immediately. What happened? Just now, we seem to see the Eye of Fog City falling. They looked at the guy who was carried on Mr. Clown's shoulder and burned into charcoal. He's Ren. Dagonite casually threw him on the ground. He's still breathing. Take him back. He should be able to be saved. As expected of Mr. Dagonite, the 3 Grand Knights were full of admiration. Congratulations, you defeated a senior officer of Doomsday Myth. It's not me. You go back first. I still have something to do. Mr. Clown shook his head and then, under the astonished gazes of the three Grand Knights, he walked back to the crowd, to the Eye of Fog City. They didn't know what had just happened in the Eye of the Fog City, nor did they know about the terrifying black flame that had suddenly appeared. But the clown Dagonet had seen everything clearly, as well as the scene of the Ferris wheel's bearing being restored. Dagonet walked in the crowd. The crowd was discussing what had just happened. Obviously, many people saw the Eye of Fog City move. But in fact, the Eye of Fog City continued to rotate, and nothing happened, which made the crowd feel strange. It seems like the repair spell. But this level of repair spell, who else can use it except for the few people in the Magician Association? His gaze began to search through the crowd. He didn't even let go of those lovers who were walking out of their seats, trying to find some clues. But even after the tourists on the Ferris wheel had left and the staff had chosen to temporarily close the Eye of Fog City due to the unusual movement, Dagonet still didn't find anything of value. However, his clown suit attracted the attention of many tourists. In the end, Dagonet could only leave this place with doubts in his heart and return to the round table mechanism to report on his mission. Mr. Hopkins, the person in charge of the agency, had given him an order that could not be disobeyed. He was required to rush back immediately to explain the matter of Reed. Later, after repeated inspections by the staff, they found that the Eye of Fog City did not have any faults. Then, under the strong request of the tourists, it was reopened. A new batch of tourists was waiting in line to enter the cockpit. Boss Luo bought 2 sticks of ice cream from the ice cream cart nearby and came to Miss Maid's side. He chuckled and said, "Sit again. Don't be angry this time. There shouldn't be anything strange happening." "I'm not angry." Miss Maid smiled slightly. Boss Luo just smiled and didn't say anything. He had burned people to such an extent. After that, nothing happened. Sir Hopkins was 60 years old this year. His gray hair was very neatly combed. As the person in charge of the round table mechanism in Fog City, he had served for more than 30 years and witnessed the birth of 2 generations of the 12 Knights of the Round Table. But he was just an ordinary person. He didn't have the strength and strong physique of the Knights. But he had another identity that was a member of the royal family of the ancient British Empire. That's about it. In front of this Sir Hopkins, Mr. Clown stood very properly. I suspect that there's a very powerful magician in the Fog City. Not only can he use the super standard restoration spell, but he also has the terrifying black flame. According to our information about the Magicians Association, there is no one who fits your description, Knight Dagonet. Sir Hopkins said slowly, "Of course, I believe that as a noble knight, you didn't deceive me. So, I will send someone to investigate as soon as possible. Now, we should discuss the matter of Rand." Dagonet said in surprise, "Sir, hasn't Rand been caught?" Sir Hopkins made a gesture to wait, and at this moment, the door of the room was pushed open. Gareth, also one of the 12 Knights, walked in directly. As the center of the country, the Fog City had a total of 12 Knights of the Round Table. One of them was Her Majesty the Queen, who was responsible for guarding the country. The other 2 were Gareth and Dagonet. They were mainly responsible for the security of non-human creatures in the Fog City area. Of course, more ordinary knights and grand knights in the mechanism were dispatched. Gareth would occasionally participate in ordinary operations, mainly because he was idle. As for Dagonet, it depended on his mood, and he would only act on things that interested him. "Gareth is here. We can start now." Sir Hopkins knocked on the table and said. Gareth suddenly said, "Sir, don't we need to wait for Lancelot?" Sir Hopkins said, "Lancelot is with Her Majesty the Queen and can't leave for the time being. I'll send the content of this meeting over later." "What the hell happened?" Gareth asked sternly. Hopkins rarely asked him and Dagonet to discuss issues at the same time. The last time they met was to deal with the holy blood ceremony that the 13 clans were about to hold this year, more than a month ago. It's about the organization Doomsday Myth. Sir Hopkins turned off the lights in the room and turned on the side projector at the same time. On the wall, the projected information began to become conspicuous. Pictures flashed in front of Gareth and Dagonet's eyes, and their faces gradually became dignified. The National Museum of Scotland, Blenheim Palace, Sheffield Cathedral, and Old Trafford Stadium. And there's even a league match being held in the stadium, with tens of thousands of fans watching from the seats. Sir Hopkins said with a heavy expression, "Just tonight, more than an hour ago, these places were attacked at the same time. If you count the Eye of Fog City, there are a total of 5 places." Who did it? Gareth frowned. This was the most serious provocation to the British Empire. The shadow snake is about to reappear, and this is the beginning, starting from death. Sir Hopkins said seriously, "Doomsday myth," and, without exception, these words written in blood were all left in these places that were attacked. Are these thugs planning to declare war on us? Dagonet narrowed his eyes. "I'm not sure if they've declared war or not," Sir Hopkins said in a deep voice. But it's clear that Her Majesty was furious after learning about these things. The myth of Doomsday is so crazy that they dared to attack so many places in broad daylight. Then, in the next second, they might directly break into the royal palace. Her Majesty isn't willing to let Lancelot leave at all. It's reasonable to say that Doomsday Myth is just a new organization, Gareth said in a low voice. Most of the people they recruit are on the Magician Association's wanted list, and there are also some Inhumans who have a very bad reputation. But overall, they're just a plate of loose sand and haven't done anything too outrageous in the past year. This time, why are they making such a big fuss? We have to find out something from the captured reed, otherwise we'll always be in a passive position, Sir Hopkins said solemnly. "Knight Gareth, Knight Dargoni, I'm now officially ordering you two to find out all the people related to the Doomsday Myth hidden in the Fog City. We can't let these lunatics move again under our noses." "Sir, what about the orcs who went missing?" Gareth asked. "Let Grand Knight Simpton do a complicated search. The most important thing now is to organize the next activities of Doomsday Myth, especially similar attacks. They can't happen again." "Yes, sir." The two stood at attention, clenched their fists, and put them on their chests. On the street, the pedestrians who were returning at night stood in front of the window in front of the TV shop, watching the temporary news that was being reported on the TV. They all covered their mouths with their hands, because the news report was too scary. It seemed to be a terrorist attack. At the same time, in different places, the number of casualties was still being calculated, but no organization had admitted it yet. Miss Maid was in a good mood. After coming down from the Eye of Fog City for the second time, she had been in a good mood. Even if she saw the news at this time, she didn't have any influence. Instead, she was very obedient and accompanied her master to watch the news live on TV. "It should be the same group of people as the one in the Eye of Fog City, just now," Luaccio said thoughtfully. Although Miss Maid did throw out a ball of black flame. Unless the customer asked, the club basically wouldn't kill any creatures. After all, according to the previous business model, every one of them could be a potential customer. But of course, it wasn't a small punishment. After all, it could be said that it directly burned half of their lives. It seems that it's necessary to clean up this dangerous source that can lead to the death of a large number of potential customers. Miss Maid smiled softly. "We're actually not the messengers of justice." Luaccio smiled and was quite happy with Miss Maid's expression of emotions. In fact, this reason seemed to be reasonable. After all, compared to the previous president, his degree of freedom was actually higher. There seems to be an organization similar to the Authority here, Luaccio thought for a while, and said, "They should be able to deal with it." "Well, do you know the Knights of the Round Table?" Miss Maid said telepathically. "Master, are you thinking about the incident that you met Mr. Amonst in Tushini's manor that day?" Luaccio nodded, opened his palm, and a necklace appeared. This was what Amonst handed over before his death, an opportunity to participate in the trial of the 12 Knights' inheritance. Such an opportunity was probably very precious for people who wanted to become knights. But naturally, it didn't have much effect on Boss Luo. This was not a trade item, but something given by Amonst before his death. Luaccio wanted to give such an opportunity to the right person. "Master, how much do you know about the Knights of the Round Table?" Miss Maid asked softly. Luaccio said honestly, "Not much, probably familiar stories like King Arthur, the Sword in the Lake, and the Fairy. Well, I think the content of the cartoons I watched when I was young doesn't count. Is there really a fairy in the lake? Miss Maid thought for a while and said, generally speaking, the sword in the lake in the popular knowledge of King Arthur came from the legend of the Celtic gods, the magic sword Caliban that was held by the hero Fergus Mac Roy and the Celtic gods. As for the fairy in the lake, it also belongs to the Celtic gods. The queen of the shadow country that Master met in South America, who was summoned by Prince Lucifer, also came from this god system. Celtic gods. Luaccio nodded and remembered this god system. Miss Maid suddenly said, however, the Celtic gods have perished, and the entire Holy Kingdom has been broken. Finally, it was swallowed up by the dimensional gap. In the end, many gods in the god system could only live among the heroic spirits and become servants by obeying their contractors. Only then could they survive as heroic spirits. In fact, after King Arthur returned to the Utopia after his death, he also became a summoned heroic spirit when the Holy Kingdom perished. As for the first generation of the 12 Knights, they also entered the heroic spirits one by one soon after. But before the 12 Knights died, they left a part of their power to guard the country. She twirled her fingers around the ends of her hair gently. The Knights of the Round Table is actually an organization that preserved part of the power of the 12 first-generation Knights. It was established after the death of the 12 Knights. Over the years, it has been training qualified knights to inherit the power. In the beginning, the Knights of the Round Table was more like a civilian organization. It did not participate in the later division and war of the British Kingdom. It just stopped the local evil. But in modern times, it has the shadow of an official. The most important reason is that in modern times, there is a secret marriage between the modern royal family and the descendants of King Arthur. This successfully prompted the modern royal family of the British Kingdom to successfully intervene in the Knights of the Round Table. I see. Luaccio nodded, then smiled and said, go back and tell me in detail. There is no reason to let the ladies stand on the street all the time. Miss Chambermaid had long since ceased to breathe. Yin 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 P.S. for 27th. Chapter 1281. Peter Chan had been standing in front of the Song Dynasty Hotel, worried. Originally, there should have been someone with a higher position to replace him. In other words, even the president of the Song Dynasty branch in Fog City would have been happy to do this bellboy job. However, Peter Chan was lucky enough to be the first one to receive a guest at the airport. But at this time, Peter Chan definitely did not think that this job was a beautiful job. More than an hour ago, several terrorist attacks had occurred in several places in the British Isles at the same time, especially the scene of the football stadium. The injuries reported on the television could be said to be shocking. Although Fog City was still safe for the moment, Peter Chan really didn't know how angry Miss Ng, who could fire the president of the branch, would be if something happened. Her attitude should be tougher. Even if she didn't prepare a car, she should at least send 2 people to follow her. Peter Chan muttered outside the hotel, burning with anxiety. Fortunately, in such a torturous wait, Luaccio and the servant girl slowly walked in from outside. Looking at the relaxed expressions on their faces, Peter Chan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, Master Chio, I want to swear to the great Shiva that next time, I won't let you go out alone. Peter Chan walked up quickly. He was still wearing the clothes he wore when he picked Luaccio up at the airport. In fact, during the 2 days when Luaccio stayed here, Peter Chan didn't intend to let himself get off work. Anyway, there were many rooms in the hotel, so it was not a problem to wash up, eat, and sleep here. Mr. Chun, are you worried about the attack? Luaccio smiled. Don't worry, we're fine. It's quite safe here. That's right. But Peter Chan said, but those attackers are not humane. Today is Edinburgh. Who knows, they might suddenly appear in Fog City later in the night. Master Chio, it's safer for you and your partner to stay in the hotel. If you feel bored, we have a lot of entertainment facilities here. I'm sure you won't feel bored. Anyway, he had more than half a day, so there's a lot of time for him to walk around. Luaccio also wanted to see if something would happen while he was hiding in this hotel. He planned to stay for another day and then leave for the university the day after tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chun, Luaccio replied casually. I'll accompany you 2 back to your room. Peter Chan seemed to be worried. Perhaps he would only relax when he saw the two of them return to their room. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the lobby of the hotel. A group of security personnel rushed out in a hurry. They were chasing a guy in a black coat. The guy in a black coat was extremely agile. He jumped up and down in the lobby, making the security personnel chasing after him look like they were in a sorry state. Even many customers who were checking in were caught in the crossfire. What happened? What happened? Chun Bide angrily grabbed a security guard and questioned him. The security in the Song dynasty had always been very good. Such a thing would not happen even once in a few years. If the VIP was harassed and the VIP casually told Missing that the security here was not good, the shop in Fog City would probably be shaken up. The security guard obviously recognized Chun Bide and quickly said, "Mr. Chun, a guy ran into the kitchen from somewhere and is stealing food. He's not our guest. We wanted to drive him away, but this guy is too agile. You saw it. Bastard. There are so many people, and you can't even catch one person." Peter Chan was furious, but it was useless to be angry. After all, it had happened. After the guy in the black coat caused a huge commotion in the hall, he immediately rushed out. "Really? I'm sorry to make you laugh." Peter Chan awkwardly came in front of Luochio. Just a moment ago, he said that the security here was actually very good. Luochio casually glanced at the direction where the guy rushed out and said with a smile, "Mr. Chun, if you catch him, don't be too strict." But this person is a thief?" Peter Chan was startled. If a thief was caught, even if he was not taken to the police station, he would at least be beaten. It was a basic practice. Luochio shook his head slightly. If he wasn't hungry or had no choice, he wouldn't steal food. Besides, although it was a bit messy, the other party didn't really hurt anyone, right? Then okay. Chun Bide nodded. Although he promised, after he really caught the culprit, he would say it then. He smiled apologetically and said, "Young Master Chio, you're really a kind person. I'll send the two of you back to your room." After saying that, Peter Chan turned to look at the security guard who was caught for questioning and said in a deep voice, "You heard that, right? After catching him, don't be too strict. If he is hungry, give him something to eat and drive him away." The security guard quickly nodded and ran away. But this thief was not easy to catch. At this time, the security guard secretly complained in his heart. This guy was simply like a circus monkey. "Over here. Quick, someone come. Catch him." How big was the security team of this Song Dynasty Hotel in Fog City? At this time, 50 to 60 security guards were shuttling back and forth on the first floor of the hotel. The number of security guards who joined the team gradually increased. Damn it! He escaped. Over there. He went over there. This thief seemed to have brought more chaos to the hotel than expected, especially in the commercial street inside the hotel. It was a complete mess. When a large number of security guards rushed into the commercial street and started a carpet search at the glass curtain wall outside the hotel, a small head stretched down, looking at the chaos inside, and then quickly shrank his neck. The thief, who was wearing a black coat, was now stuck to the outer wall of the hotel in an inconceivable way. The thief in black adjusted his body, raising his head and looking at the upper floor of the hotel. He suddenly exerted his strength and began to run on the outer wall of the hotel like a beast. The thief ran all the way from the outer wall of the hotel to the helipad on the top floor of the hotel. He stopped, looking down at the city below from the top of the building. His strange amber eyes carried a trace of urgency. "Ajia, where are you?" He curled up his body, tightly wrapping the coat on his body. After a whole day of running, he was already exhausted. He just wanted to take a short rest. Suddenly, a soft and gentle sound of a zither came, song, far away in the sky, flying to the distant sky. In front of the luxurious Behiston Louis XV, Luochio was playing this song. On the one hand, it was because Miss Maid recognized the origin of this Behiston Louis XV. However, it was not the original one that had been lost in history. It should be a replica made later. Of course, the price was not cheap. Therefore, he held the attitude that it would be a waste if he did not buy it. Boss Luo, who liked to shop in the supermarket on discount days, had an instinct for free things that even the altar couldn't erase. On the other hand, it was naturally because it was better to play it this way. Yui stood beside him, with her hair hanging down. Looking at her master's face and hands, she smiled more. Of course, she was listening more. Far away in the sky was a very short song. A few minutes passed quietly. Naturally, it couldn't be compared with a complete zither song. What long song? Is it the work of a master? When Luacio's fingers finally stopped, and the sound lingered like a woman's rest, Miss Maid sighed softly. Boss Luo smiled slightly. It's not a master. As for the origin, it doesn't matter if you don't know it. Miss Maid's finger gently pressed on the white key, the F-sharp sound. Since her master said it didn't matter if she didn't know it, then she didn't need to be curious anymore. They had many ways to kill time. Luocio didn't intend to use the whole night to cram in knowledge about the Celtic gods, so he moved a little on the chair and let Yi sit down. Let's play a song together? Luocio said softly. I believe you'll teach me well. For hands together. But Miss Maid seemed to want to be a little naughty at this time. Her right hand moved quickly on the white key. Dance of the Bumblebee. Her fingers danced in the air as she looked back with a smile. Their eyes met on the same level. Luocio liked this kind of lively smile. His hand passed through her hands and began to play the dance of the bumblebee. They crossed their hands, sometimes looking at each other, sometimes closing their eyes to listen. Suddenly, Luocio's left hand moved to the back of Miss Maid's hand, as if he was playing the piano, bouncing rapidly on the back of her hand, as if he was responding to her naughty behavior at the beginning. Until the end of the song, when a last lingering sound disappeared in the air, Luocio looked away from Miss Maid and looked at the balcony. The city lights outside the hotel were reflected on the sliding glass door, and a slightly childish face appeared in the light at the same time. What a polite little guy. Luocio finally pressed the piano key, and the sound of the piano key bounced out. The glass door of the balcony opened automatically at this time, and a figure fell into the room. But he soon found his balance. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he didn't really fall on the carpet. His body was wrapped in a black coat. The coat was really big, and in fact, it didn't fit him well. He looked a little funny in it. Even the fisherman's hat hung down to his eyebrows, and there were some loose places. His hands were hidden in the sleeves. He stood there uneasily, as if he didn't know how to deal with what happened at this time. So he resolutely chose to step back, turning around and rushing out of the balcony, jumping on the wall of the balcony. Luocio said, "People outside are looking for you. It's not too late to leave when things calm down. At least it will save you some trouble." He squatted on the wall, pressing his hands at the same time. At the moment when the sound came, he was originally jumping, but at this time he was startled. His jumping posture was not completely completed, and his body lost balance and fell down. He really fell down. He screamed in horror, and his body suddenly disappeared from the wall. But in the next moment, a hand climbed up the wall again, and then a second hand. At this time, the small head carefully rose from outside the wall, inquiring everything in the room. It saw that the young man in the room was now walking over step by step. Luocio had already given up. Anyway, if he stayed in the room and didn't go out, something would probably happen. Now, he had a kind of attitude of, since it's already here, let's just take it as it comes. His eyes were amber with strange vertical pupils. A few symmetrical long whiskers could be seen on his face, which was stuck with stains and oil. Orc, Miss Maid, who came with Boss Luo, recognized the thief at a glance. This was like a switch which stimulated him in a flash. His amber pupils showed a trace of fierceness. He used his hands to support his body, jumped up high, and then pounced on Luocio and Yi from top to bottom. This kind of sudden attack would trigger Boss Luo's absolute defense from the club. Luocio had to wave his hand. Before he pounced, his body was fanned away by a gentle force, and then he fell into the small swimming pool on the terrace. Splash! The water splashed everywhere. The water in the small swimming pool was actually not deep, but the thief who fell into the water seemed to be drowning. He was desperately struggling in the pool. His coat and hat had already been taken off, and he finally climbed to the edge of the pool with great difficulty. He raised his head, gasping for breath, as if he had just survived a disaster. However, his two furry ears were trembling slightly on his head at this moment. His expression was gloomy and uncertain, and his eyes were fixed on the master and servant in front of him. His intention to attack didn't seem to disappear. Luaccio and Miss Maid looked at each other. Miss Maid said softly, "Orcs seem to be in a bad situation, so they are more vigilant against people who recognize them. In the Middle Ages, orcs even became the playthings of slaves and nobles. Until today, there are still people engaged in capturing orcs and selling them. This naturally happened in Europe. Luaccio, who grew up in Kelowna, naturally didn't see it with his own eyes." "I see." Boss Luo nodded, then looked at the little orc and said in English, "I'm sorry. We don't mean any harm to you." The little orc in the pool at this time shouted angrily and pounced out of the water again. "It's Turkish," Miss Maid reminded at the side. Luaccio had to buy the ability to master the language and said again, "We really don't mean any harm. We just don't want you to cause any trouble outside. After all, this hotel has something to do with me more or less." He directly restrained the little orc's next attack. The reason why he did it himself was that compared to Miss Maid, Boss Luo was actually better at delicate work. If Miss Maid restrained the little orc with the black flame, even if she controlled it to the smallest extent, it would more or less bring pain to the little orc. "You see, if we want to attack you, I think you won't have a second chance to attack." "Huh?" Looking at the little orc who was restrained in the air, Luaccio was stunned. His windbreaker had been left behind in the water, and he was only wearing a rather thin and ill-fitting male shirt, which almost reached his knees. But now it was wet. Whether it was the slightly bright red color on the chest or the looming triangular position, it showed that under the rather masculine appearance at the beginning, it was her. Let me go. Yin 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 PS1. Correction, yesterday's book was I'm Really Immortal. I read it, but every time I read it, I silently read Immortal PS2. Catch up later. Chapter 1282. Ask the room service to prepare some food and some suitable clothes. In the room, the little orc wrapped in a bath towel sat on the floor. Although she was holding a cup of hot tea in her hand, she still looked warily at the guy who easily subdued her. As if to make herself understand, they had been conversing in the language of her hometown since just now. Miss Maid used to have a part-time identity as the world's top mysterious fashion designer, so she was naturally familiar with the measurements. She nodded and didn't need to measure it, because she had already visually measured it. It was a pair of A. So Miss Maid walked slowly to the telephone and dialed the room service number. Unexpectedly, the person who answered the phone was Peter Chan. He really did his best. "Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with? Can you help to prepare clothes?" "Of course, clothes." Peter Chan, who had been waiting for the telephone line of this suite in the room, was slightly stunned at this moment. Hearing the voice of the woman beside Master Chio, he asked curiously, "What kind of clothes?" "Well, do you have a female sailor suit? Try to get a smaller size and underwear. Is that okay?" "Of course. It will be sent to your room soon." Peter Chan quickly agreed and hung up the phone at this moment. Peter Chan quickly went to ask people to prepare clothes. But on the way, he couldn't help but feel strange. The woman's body proportions are very good, but wearing a smaller size seems interesting. Does this Master Chio actually have some special hobbies? Chun Bide muttered. He was wondering if he should send this information to Miss Ing on the other side of the hemisphere. Perhaps he could get another chance for a promotion and a raise. It was normal for the hotel to prepare the food. As for the clothes, it was actually unnecessary, but recently he had been squandering a lot. Based on the principle of saving as much as possible, Boss Luo naturally wouldn't be greedy for convenience. Besides, they were not in the wilderness, and the hotel actually prepared the food quite quickly. The food and clothes were delivered at the same time, and it took less than 15 minutes. Luaccio went to another room to avoid them. As for the servant girl, she took the food and clothes and communicated with the little orc. It was also worry-free, wasn't it? When Yu Yi appeared in front of him with the little beast man, the little beast man seemed to have let down most of his guard, and his face was full of uneasiness. Boss Luo asked curiously, "What method did you use?" I just treated her wound and told her that we might be able to help her. Miss Maid smiled and said, but she needs to collect some rewards. Compared with the kindness of unknown origin, she actually believes in compensation more. True enough. As for business, Luaccio didn't have any objections. He began to size up this little orc. She looked about the same age as a human girl of 14 or 15 years old. However, the clothes he was wearing were a little strange. It was a female sailor suit with a short skirt and long red and white socks. He really didn't know where to start complaining. Or, the person who prepared the clothes was actually very knowledgeable? Mr. Chun, there seems to be some misunderstanding. Miss Maid's eyes were full of tears. Even if there was a misunderstanding, it shouldn't be a sailor's suit. Boss Luo just pretended that he didn't notice this strange point. He nodded and finally went against his original intention. He changed the little orc into another set of clothes. Of course, this change was only for a moment, and there wouldn't be any situation such as tearing the clothes. Simple cropped jeans, a short-sleeve shirt, white flats, and a plain coat. Boss Luo was never good at clothes, but at least it was better than the terrible sailor suit just now, wasn't it? Actually, the clothes just now will make it easier to move. The little orc suddenly said seriously. She tried to make her expression look natural, but she couldn't hide the shock in her heart. You're a magician? I'm beginning to believe that you might be able to help me. Only a magician who could use all kinds of magic would have the ability to change people's clothes with a press of a button, right? And the ability to imprison herself? Just take it that I am. Luaccio ignored the little orc's first sentence and smiled. How should we call you? Lael, she said. Tulip. Luaccio nodded slightly and said, Miss Lael, we are indeed engaged in activities of providing paid services to customers. How can we help you? Lael was silent for a moment and finally made up her mind. Just like what he said, with such a strong power, it would be easy for him to do anything to her. There was no need to beat around the bush. I think you can help me find my brother. His name is Oga. Lael gritted her teeth and said her origin. Originally, my brother and I were caught by a group of damn orc traffickers. They planned to transport us to an auction. But when we passed by here, the ship was suddenly attacked. A group of strange people barged in and fought with those damn orc traffickers. Taking advantage of the chaos, many orcs began to escape. My brother and I were separated in the process of escaping. Originally, I could have found my brother by following his scent, but there was a sudden rain and the scent was washed away. I couldn't find him. She became annoyed. This little orc girl didn't have it easy. She was caught by the orc traffickers and brought to a distant country. Facing an unfamiliar city and language barrier, she thought that she had escaped, but she was separated from her family. Your brother's name is Oga, right? Luaccio confirmed with Lael. She nodded. Under Lael's astonished gaze, Luaccio reached out his hand and grabbed a parchment scroll from the air. He opened it and glanced at it before saying, I think I found out where your younger brother is. Really? She was so excited that she instantly rushed forward. She almost pounced on Luaccio, but at the same time, a gentle force blocked her body. You? Don't worry, your brother is safe for the time being. Luaccio rolled up the sheepskin scroll in his hand and looked at the little orc as if he was thinking about something. Reward? Lael seemed to have realized something and asked tentatively. Luaccio nodded. There was a certain price to pay to buy information. Naturally, there was an income to be paid. The most basic trading principle of the club had always been there. Even if the club had the authority to open and close a trade at any time, when the trade process was close, it would still be considered to have started. Of course, whether this trade was for profit or a loss, the boss had more freedom to decide. Then 1 month's time. Luaccio thought for a moment and said slowly, Miss Lael, I need you to give me 1 month's time. When Lael heard this, she was first shocked. She was prepared to pay the price, but when she heard that it was a month's time, she subconsciously moved her lips. She clenched her teeth and nodded resolutely. Okay, as long as you can really help me find my brother, I will accompany you for a month's time. But I won't accept requests that are too perverted. Also, you must take contraceptive measures. At this moment, Boss Luo was glad that he did not drink tea. In his memory, something similar seemed to have happened before. in South America, when he met the lady with the ability of a dimensional observer. Luaccio glanced at the servant girl and was surprised to find that she did not have the same kind smile as before. Vaguely, there seemed to be an expression of joy. That seemed to be a good thing. Luaccio waved his hand at Lael and said seriously, "Miss Lael, I think you have misunderstood. What I mean is that this information is worth 1 month of your life, which means that after you find your brother, I will take 1 month of your life as a reward. You don't need to accompany me for a month, and I don't have any strange hobbies." My life? Lael opened her mouth in confusion. How could he give her his life? Furthermore, it was specifically a month's time? Luaccio said, "Let me explain it this way. You need time to find your brother, and we will help you save this time, allowing you to find him in an extremely short period of time. But at that time, when you use normal methods to find your brother may encounter danger, and you may not be able to save him in time. Our service will allow you to avoid such risks, so naturally, we will pay you more. At present, time is equivalent to payment, and it should be the most cost-effective way for you to pay. After all, it's just finding your brother's location." Lael shook her head. She did not understand and did not even know how cost-effective this 1 month's expenditure was. She said seriously, "If you say 1 month, then 1 month. Anyway, you don't need me to accompany you." Ignoring the last sentence, Luaccio made a final confirmation to her. "Miss Lael, are you willing to pay 1 month of your life as the price to buy this information about your brother's location from us? You are very young now, and perhaps you don't really care about the length of your life, but when you reach the end of your life, you may regret this 1 month." Cut the crap. Lael frowned. After all, life withdrawal was too hard to believe. She was more inclined to believe that the other party was kind-hearted and was just joking to make her feel more comfortable accepting the help. But human magicians were not good people. "Then let's sign the contract." Luaccio waved his hand, and a contract parchment opened in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, her impatience won over her rationality, and she clenched her teeth and pressed her hand on it. Miraculously, although she could not understand the contents of the contract, its meaning was directly imprinted into her consciousness at this moment. Life payment, does it really exist? She finally got the information about her brother's current location from Luaccio. On the parchment, there seemed to be a map. There were 2 marks on the map. One was red, the other was blue. She raised her head in confusion. Luaccio said, "The blue arrow is your location, and the red mark is your brother's location. You can easily find your brother, and it's not far away." Lael nodded and didn't say anything else. Instead, he opened the window and jumped out. Soon, he disappeared into the night. Miss Maid walked to the window and closed it. Then she turned around and chuckled. "It seems that she is impatient," Luaccio said with a faint smile. "Speaking of which, why did Peter Chan prepare such clothes?" Miss Maid blinked. "Master, do you want to see it?" Luaccio laughed. "You are becoming more and more like the variety witch." Miss Maid walked slowly and squatted down beside Luaccio. She held his hand and put it on her face. Then she raised her head and asked softly, "Master, will you be willing to be my devil?" He lowered his head and kissed her. This time it was lips. In the evening, the social work center had already closed, but Will still stayed. If there was a language barrier, the concert was a good way to communicate. Will had always been like this. If he could perform with his heart, he would be able to convey the message to the other party. This child looked 13 or 14 years old. Although he looked like a girl, he was indeed a boy. His 2 colleagues and band members had already left early to avoid being challenged in their sexual orientation. In general, Will was a person who couldn't watch others suffer without helping. He had to work overtime and act as a temporary psychological counselor. There was no good way to eliminate the child's uneasiness. Will thought of a way. He came to the child with a wooden guitar. Of course, it couldn't be a punk rock type of music. Will chose soft country music. The child had been curling up in the corner of the room since he ate, as if he was afraid of everything and people. When Will came in with the guitar, he even trembled slightly. Will later saw the bruises on the child's back. Some of the bruises were already old, but some were still scarlet and eye-catching. It was obvious that he had been treated violently. Will found it hard to imagine what kind of cruel person would do such a thing to such a delicate and pretty child. I don't mean any harm. I just hope he can calm down. Will said slowly with his softest voice, "It's safe here. No one will hurt you. Please believe us. We will help you, although you don't seem to understand." The child just trembled more when Will approached him. Will could only smile and sit in front of the child. After slightly adjusting the strings of the guitar, he began to play with his fingers. Original scenery of Hometown. Even if he loved punk rock, he instantly liked this song from a distant country after hearing it. Relax, this is a song taught to me by a friend from the East who came to study music. At the same time, Will began to pluck the strings. The sound was like the wind in the field, low and melodious. Gradually, the delicate boy became less afraid. He even stopped trembling and looked more at Will's hands. He seemed to be attracted by the sound and unconsciously became quiet. At the same time, his eyes became wet. He subconsciously reached out and touched his face, only to find that he was crying. Will glanced at him and didn't stop. Instead, he insisted on finishing the song. Then, he took a tissue and handed it to the boy. He hesitated, but still took it timidly and said something in a low voice. Will couldn't tell which country's language it was, but it didn't hinder the communication between the two sides at this time. It was probably words of thanks. Will smiled and waved the guitar in his hand. "Do you want to give it a try?" He seemed to understand Will's meaning. He hesitated and nodded. Will handed the guitar to the child and began to fiddle with his posture. He let him pick up the guitar, made of rosewood, in the correct posture. This is called grade. This is called grade pillar. Starting from here is the first grade. Although he didn't know if the child could understand, Will still patiently taught him. Yin 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 PS. 5/27.